The following podcast is proudly brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use the link in the description and use offer code BROKENSILICON to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy to make ramen. And also use the offer code BROKENSILICON to get 30% off all Windows keys and die shrink to get 3% off everything else at cdkeyoffer.com. All right, on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and this is the part 2 series for the end of 2021, looking forward to 2022. I believe last year our guest was part of it, but I think what I did is talk about 2020 less so than the next year, which back then would have been 2021. Just so it happens, though, the way this podcast works is, of course, there's a guest episode, a Dan News episode. The way the cycle was working, though, it was supposed to be Dan's turn. And so I didn't want to, figure out some way. And it would have landed, it was going to land perfectly so that the first news episode was the first week of the year, too, when I get back to work. So I thought what would be fun, though, is, first of all, I do all the news episodes with Dan, so he's already easy to do a look back at 2021 with. And instead of just kind of talking about rumors me and Dan have already talked about a dozen times before, I thought it would be fun if I kind of organized the notes that are out there, both from me and other places online, and get an outside person's opinion on what's actually probably going to be exciting this year if it all turns out to be correct. So yeah, Dawid Does Tech Stuff is here again. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody who you are if they don't know?
Hello, I'm Dawid. I do tech stuff. I guess that's about as much information as you need. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here because it's always this is the third year in a row that we're doing this series, and it's always fun to get to chat to the leak guy about all of the leaks. So yeah, I'm excited.
Is that what I am? I'm the leak guy?
I mean, that's how I know you. I know you as the leak guy.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's what most people think of me as now. It's so funny. In 2019, I thought of myself as just another one of those people that either does tech stuff or yells about the latest release. And then just over time, it was like, if I just put a little more effort into this and actually try to reach out and talk with people every other week, maybe I can actually learn about what's coming out in a few years, How would you describe your channel at this point? I mean, it's grown so much from when I don't even remember how I first found you. It's probably one of those videos looking at budget graphics cards on Amazon, including a GT 710 that we can't believe is still sold for over $100.
Yeah, that's crazy.
How would you describe the tech stuff you do now?
Well, so at the moment, I try and just do tech on things that I can buy myself at shops, which at this moment is quite, it's just a bunch of random things because you can't just go and buy graphics cards and whatever. So yeah, I try and review and just kind of play with hardware that is available. And I just try and make it into a video that's fun to watch.
How does that work then? Do you just... do a lot of them just come from suggestions to you from Amazon, or you walk into a computer store and it's like, well, what is that? Does that actually do what it says it does?
That's often how it works. And it's usually just this thing looks really stupid. Let me see if it's actually as dumb as I think it is, or if it's actually good. So it's not that I'm looking for good stuff. It's usually bad stuff that catches my attention. That's how I ended up doing a lot of videos on pre-builds. I've done a lot of videos on pre-builds lately, and they're really interesting because they're just such weird combinations of hardware often, so it's fun to look at those abominations.
So pre-builds at a store that has a pawn shop, used computers, or is it pre-builds that you'll just go to random websites and see how good of a job they do? What are most of your recent pre-builds you've looked at? Where'd they come from?
So they're often OEM pre-builds because those are usually the worst out of the various options that you can get. and a bunch of them are like Amazon sellers, and then like local PC stores will have their own kind of just lines and lineups of pre-builts. So then I'll buy those and see how they stack up. The local shop ones are actually usually the best.
Yeah.
And I've also had a look at a bunch of AliExpress ones, which were surprisingly good, actually. AliExpress is a decent place to get a pre-built from, apparently. Yeah.
So when you say like OEM ones, you mean like Dell, HP, Lenovo, those types of places. Like, are they getting better or worse? Because I know in the early 2000s, at least Dell in my experience was just bad if it was a desktop. Well, honestly, anything they made in the 2000s I thought was pretty terrible. Yeah. But like, are they getting better?
Compared to the 2000s, no. I actually recently compared a Compact, which is the brand that HP was. And it's way better than modern HP pre-builts in the sense that they don't have a bunch of weird proprietary form factors in them, or they didn't have a bunch of weird proprietary form factors in them, which is a huge problem at the moment. So it means that you can't like upgrade this stuff easily in terms of like motherboards and cases and power supplies. So Dell is very bad at that. HP is a little bit better. I think Dell's probably the worst still. Like they're not good.
Well, so before, we've actually done something fun, I think, for today, like I said, where, I'll kind of go through the things coming out next year and see what you think of them. But I would be remiss if I didn't at least start with this, though. I mean, of all of the things, so many releases in 2021 and so many rumors about things in 2022. But like, I don't know, let me see the mid-range RDNA 2 Ampere, Cezanne, Alder Lake, Apple, M1 Max and Pro, Van Gogh. Well, Van Gogh technically hasn't come out yet because Steam Deck has been delayed. Nvidia blocked from buying ARM. And then just the torrents of leaks from every company about what's coming in the next few years. I mean, which one of the like big news stories or releases from this year is the most exciting to you? Or which few things? I'm not going to limit you to one.
I think it's probably Alder Lake, the desktop launch, just because it was that point where AMD overtook Intel like ages ago, and then they were just so far ahead with a lot of stuff that it was really difficult for Intel to catch up. And now it's at the point where these two companies are just going at each other for the performance crown. And that's always amazing because at the end of the day, like the consumer wins in a situation like that because they keep needing to push the boundaries of performance. So that was a really awesome launch to see.
Almost the only awesome launch of this year in terms. I mean, I've had fun talking about all of the launches, but in the terms of like you could buy it, it took performance crowns, and I think people underestimated it. Unlike other things, which I don't know what every graphics card release this year is pretty much exactly what I think we expected.
Yes, yeah, it really has been. It's basically just been no availability. Although, again, with a lot of this stuff, the best and most reliable way to get your hands on it was through pre-builts. I think pretty much every GPU I've gotten this year has been through one of those. But yeah, they've been just as expected. Although, like you said, with the Alder Lake launch, the CPUs have been available, but I found that like DDR4 motherboards for, like Z690 motherboards have been a problem to get hold of. And that's a problem because DDR5 isn't available. It's just widely available. So most of the motherboards don't have RAM available for them. So the actual CPUs were available, but I don't know how easy it was to actually get your hands on a functioning Alder Lake desktop system.
Whereas
as of late.
DDR itself is going down in price again, finally, for the first time in, honestly, years. I mean, I think we talked about it the last time you were on. I'm still using the RAM I got with Skylake in 2016. It's 3200 megahertz, overclocked at 3600 megahertz. I got it for $63 for 16 gigabytes in 2016. And it's like, why don't you upgrade your RAM? It's like, it's still not actually cheaper than what I got 5 years ago. So maybe I'll wait until DDR5 is more ubiquitous. On that note, though, I do remember before Alder Lake came out, talking to, because I've been doing Alder Lake leaks for years, talking to people before the launch, and they're like, it's going to support DDR4 and DDR5. We think we're going to probably do mostly DDR4 motherboards, actually. And then like a month before launch, they were like, never mind, we're going to do DDR5 because everyone's paying more money for everything right now. I wonder if they switched to DDR5, overproduced those motherboards, and then kind of overestimated how much people would just buy the newest thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point actually, because like in all of the shops that I've gone to, none of them have had actual DDR5 availability, and there was one DDR4 Z690 board available of the 5 major PC shops that I go to in Vancouver. So it's like, yeah, they must have gotten some estimate wrong there, because even Corsair was struggling to get availability for RAM to sample to
Hmm.
people, So it's like, it's bad when even sampling is a problem for like videos and stuff. So yeah, someone did some wrong calculation there about what to do with the motherboards for Alder Lake.
You know, again, this you say this is the launch you're most excited about from this year. So, and I think we can feel that too. I think going into 2021, there was just this precipitous drop off in interest from everyone towards every tech channel. Like it was, you could feel it. And something about Alder Lake and the upcoming Arc release is making people excited again. I think I'm noticing a lot more interest rising again on a lot of tech channels, at least mine. I've noticed that in a lot of the ones I follow. Uh, would you recommend Alder Lake then over like Zen 3, assuming you can get the right motherboard?
So the problem with Alder Lake is the platform, in my opinion, because the motherboards that are available are very expensive, and it means that unless you're going for like a high-end CPU, something like an i9 or
Hmm.
even an i7, the motherboards don't really make sense to pair with an i5. So I think unless you're really going ham for the hardware that you're buying, I think Zen 3 is still a better option, just because of the fact that you can buy like a solid B550 motherboard for under $200, and it's, you can actually find that stuff, and you don't have to worry about RAM compatibility and things like that. So I actually think for most shoppers,
Hmm.
Zen 3 is actually still the better option, just
For like
because
if
of.
you're if you're looking at things like a 5600X, or now the 5800X is cheaper at a lot of websites, like stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. In that situation, you may not be getting the same performance, but it's you're going to be paying a lot less money, and it's going to be
Hmm.
easier to get the stuff. So yeah, I think Zen 2 is still a good option. Hmm.
And Zen 3.
Zen 3. So I meant Zen 3. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Before, the way I've always my opinion on Alder Lake has been, if you're going all out, at least in when I've checked, the availability of Alder Lake hasn't seemed that bad here. I guess I haven't checked the motherboards though. The CPUs, you can easily get them right now. In fact, the i7 at Micro Center is now, I think, $350 or $300, which is absolutely insane for that 8-core Alder Lake. But the only thing I would say about that recommendation is I just don't recommend someone get a B550 and a 5950X for $800. I think,
Yes.
but I think
No,
that's
no,
what
no.
you said. If you're going all out, Alder Lake is kind of the obvious choice now.
Yeah, because they also have a bunch of new technologies in Z690, things like PCIe 5, and it is a really good platform. But I think for the premium enthusiast, you
Hmm.
definitely don't buy a budget B550 board for a high end, like for a 5950X. That's that's probably
Well,
not going to go very well.
I've seen a lot of people in the comments talking about that. But yeah, I guess I didn't even finish my thought though. Is it's like I've seen a lot of. I remember when Alder Lake came out, and so many people were like, "I can't wait for AMD to drop prices." And I think I did several videos where I'm like, "I don't think they're going to." I think they can just get away with not lowering prices because honestly, I think you still, if you go to AMD's, obviously Micro Center has the Amazon prices drifted down, but if I go to AMD.com right now, the 5950X is sold out. The 5900X is sold out, and most of these are sold out. I think they just know during the holiday season, there's almost no point in lowering prices because it's all going to
Yeah.
sell out anyways.
Yeah, especially at the moment. Like it's if they lower prices, somebody's probably going to scalp it. So, you know.
Oh yeah, not to mention another big point I had was you have to think Alder Lake's being produced and shipping now, and what's a big problem right now? Logistics.
Yeah.
AMD CPUs are all on shelves before Alder Lake launched, so they didn't need to worry about the recent rise in shipping costs nearly as much as Intel. They knew that Yeah, I mean, you can order an Intel CPU. It's going to get there in January if you want it, though.
Yeah.
So let's move on to a couple opening reader mails before we get into the products for next year. Because
Okay.
the first one here, it talks about availability, and we're starting to get on that subject. Team OH writes in, now that 2021 has been a year of paper launches in the sense that either the price is too high or store shelves are empty, at least it feels like fake launches to me. Can TSMC, AMD, Nvidia, and Intel join forces and finally feed the demand in 2022? And let me see, refresh with new low-end MSRPs and result in lower pricing levels that have risen to new minimums. Can they fix this, or at least charter flights that I know are way more expensive to get here in time? DG2 looks promising like everything else coming out next year, but so far belongs to me in that same refresh fake paper launch category until it is actually on store shelves with a reasonable price. And I did write some notes here first. I guess I'll get to it. It's just, I think my answer is can. I mean, I broke that story that NVIDIA had stopped Ampere production in October, which is very abnormal for a holiday season. No company does that, and I think the substrate issue which was the main bottleneck, just one of the components for the wafers, I think that should be fixed by Q2. So I think they can. I think the question is, will they? I mean, do you expect things to get better next year? And it's like, I'm almost over worrying about answering this question because everyone's going to get mad if we get it wrong. But it's like, oh, get over it. Like, let's just talk. We're not. Do you think things will get better sooner or later next year? Do you think people are becoming overly pessimistic about when the shortages will get better? Or do you think that, I don't know, maybe they're underestimating it?
Well, like you said, it's purely speculative at this point. I think it could be fixed in January next year. It could happen 3 years from now. It is really all up in the air. But I am usually by default quite pessimistic about this kind of stuff. I am not. It just feels like, because there are still so many people that are willing to pay so much over
Mm,
MSRP for stuff, that as long as that kind of exists, it's going to be really difficult for companies to drop prices, because why would you? If somebody if it's the prices are the way that they are because people seem to be buying this stuff up even at ridiculous markups. So yeah, I'm in the pessimistic camp that I feel like it may take quite a while. That being said, though, there are ways to get availability. If
hmm
even if you can't walk into a shop and like buy a thing off a shelf, just like a loose graphics card, or you can still find a way to get your hands on things like buying a pre-built PC and slowly upgrading it over time, getting rid of, even if you have to buy a Dell, which is a terrifying prospect, but even if you have to go that route, you can slowly turn that into an awesome system, which I've been chatting to people on Discord over this year that have gone through that process.
hmm
And it's a really interesting way about building up your own system. So even if even if availability is problematic next year, which I think it may be for a while,
hmm
there are ways around that. You can find ways to buy graphics cards. Even like I said, if you have to buy a Dell.
Yeah, and it's like, I think we've all got to acknowledge that availability is getting better. If I go to at least depends on the product, but if I go to Newegg right now, the 6700 XT is in stock. It is for $1,000.
Yeah,
It's just, it's going to take a month of everyone who was willing to buckle and pay double MSRP to get their cards and be done paying. They like
yeah.
these distributors need to see a month of the sales dropping like a cliff off a cliff before they even consider lowering prices, I think, because it's in their best interest to keep the prices as high as they can
Yeah.
until RDNA 3 and Lovelace come out, because then they can just say, oh, but these new prices aren't that bad, right?
Yeah, no, and the thing is, they're running a business. If
hmm
someone's willing to pay 3 times the MSRP for it, that's kind of its market value, right? Because people are it's all sold out even at those prices. But it's interesting that you mentioned the RDNA 2 GPUs, because the more mid-range ones seem to be in stock. Like again at the
hmm
local shops, this is purely anecdotal, but even at the local shops, I walk in and there are actually like RX 6600 and 6600 XTs and stuff on the shelves, but they are selling for a huge amount. So AMD's kind of like the distributors have found a way to actually price themselves out of the scalpocalypse, which I think that's quite funny, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and I think I covered that. Like Navi 23, the way these things work is AMD buys up wafer capacity from TSMC really years ahead of time. And they say these wafers are going to be used for RDNA 2. It's even hard for them to change over which dies they're going to make because they lay down the groundwork and they're like, okay, so this week is when we're going to do a run of Navi 21 cards. And they plan that months ahead of time. My understanding is that in Q3, they decided to shift a lot more to Navi 23 because it's less than half the die size of Navi 21. And they're like, at least let's get cards out there. And what I'm hearing is they're going to double low-end capacity again for Navi 24, which should be half the die size of that next year. So I can't promise you there'll be a price we want, but I can tell you, like you've gone into stores, they are making them. It's just they're not going to be MSRP until people stop buying them above MSRP.
Yeah, that's definitely the problem. Yeah.
Do you remember when the 6600 XT launched? There was actually like a whole day it was in stock at MSRP. Like that was the one day of the year where it was like, I hope you guys are paying attention. This is the one chance to get something.
Yeah, but it was such a lukewarm product launch though, because it was basically like the only reason that this is appealing at all is because you don't have a better option. You know, that's kind of how it felt when it came out. It's like you're gonna buy it because what else are you gonna get?
Mm-hmm. Well, so let's start getting into the 2022 releases. I think I want to start with what is likely to be the first things to be announced. So CES is coming first week of January, as always. And if we remember, I think Cezanne was announced the last one, Renoir the one before that, and I believe Rembrandt from AMD will be announced as well. And I'm expecting Alder Lake mobile and other things to be announced around then as well. Maybe we'll get some concrete information officially from ARC. That's not a leak. We'll see. Bfish writes in, what gets me excited about 2022 releases are use cases which just weren't possible before. Potentially decent gaming performance on a laptop with integrated graphics with Rembrandt, Intel doing similar things at a better price point and at a wider availability with Alder Lake. Those Tiger Lake U chips were everywhere, and Alder Lake looks head and shoulders better, especially in terms of yields. Maybe ray tracing actually being worth the performance hit is also what I'm looking forward to. So of the mobile releases will probably get announced in Q1, Dawid. I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind that you're excited about or not. Like Rembrandt, Alder Lake, low end, maybe desktop Alder Lake. That's also a thing too that we'll probably see. Like, which one of these maybe excites you?
Like the mobile launches, I think are interesting because with Cezanne, like the previous generation the current generation of AMD mobile GPUs, like that, they're so good. Mobile CPUs, they're so good. And it'll be interesting to see how Intel responds to that because AMD they've just launched such amazing products, and it'll be interesting to see how AMD betters that. So I think those are going to be huge launches because laptops are also one of the ways in which you can still get hold of a gaming system these days, you know, like, and the more powerful they get, the better an alternative they are to a desktop system. So yeah, I think both of these, both of these mobile CPU launches are going to be awesome.
Well, and wouldn't you say, I don't know what you think, but like, as much as it seems like, and I see the reports on this all the time, like the desktop OEM build quality is just horrific. Wouldn't you say laptop build quality is getting like crazy good though?
Oh,
like compared to
yeah.
before? Like, I mean, just 6 years ago, laptops from HP and Dell were, they're horrible. Yeah. I mean, compared to like, and now it's like, they're using pretty similar build quality, if not better than Apple. I mean, my NV15 has a all copper heatsink and liquid metal on the CPU. And they did that because they were like, it was actually cheaper to just do good cooling than to use the more expensive CPU we found. You know, and they come with OLED screens now half the time. I think more and more people are underestimating how much more of a good idea it is to just get a laptop. I mean, the whole point of a desktop is it's cheaper, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, even in terms of build quality, even more budget options from like HP in terms of laptops are really well made, and they're awesome options that are often on sale. You can get a bunch of the current gen laptops on sale from places like Best Buy at the moment, and they perform really well. Like they offer a really good gaming experience. So it'll be interesting to see, how more powerful hardware stacks up, because like you said, build quality and things like that has been improving so much that laptops are just such a viable option at the moment.
Yeah, I'm looking at like available at laptops on Amazon right now, which I guess this probably isn't the perfect time to look for good price performance considering it's 1 week before Christmas. And so I'm sure
Yeah.
this is like when nothing is really on sale anymore. But I mean, you can get a 3060 laptop, it seems, for about 1200, and that's maybe, it depends, right? Obviously, if it's the
Yeah.
Max Q version, it's going to be a lot weaker than the desktop one. But I've seen the Max P ones actually be within about 10% of the desktop 3060, and that's not that. Yeah, okay. So here's like 1100 bucks. It has, let's see, I don't even know what this i5 is though, because I never know what Intel's calling an i5 or an i7 in terms of core count on laptop anymore.
Yeah, it's so confusing.
But I think they have a 12 thread. So that's 12 threads of Tiger Lake, a 3060. That's not that bad for that much. You're not building a desktop with a graphics card for that price easily, for $1,100.
Yeah, and then you can go game in a Starbucks. It's awesome. It'll
Yeah. You could just can't, or like I've done this before where I'll just like pull out a controller and start playing Battlefield on my laptop, waiting to get on a plane. Like I'll just
Yeah.
jump in a multiplayer room using the free Wi-Fi in the airport. Um, so, and I also think there's another reason to be a little excited about laptop releases early next year, and that's that talking to OEM sources at HP and Dell, like they're planning to really push Nvidia kind of out of their low-end laptops with Arc because of how much cheaper they're getting similar low-end Arc graphics cards for that are probably comparable to like a 3050 mobile in performance. What's
Oh, okay.
interesting about that then is if I remember correctly, when Nvidia announced the 3060 laptop edition, they said under $1,000. That's not really what happened. Usually those are 3050 Ti's. I suspect they're going to start offering OEMs those graphics cards for a lot less money once they get competition from Intel.
Yeah, like it's always the case that competition just means that these companies can't do what they just get away with anything anymore. So that's awesome. And the amazing thing about laptops as well is that they're not viable for a lot of the reasons why graphics cards are sold out.
Mhm.
Things like mining and stuff like that. You can't really use a laptop for. So it'll be interesting to see as Intel provides competition in that space how much more performance we're going to get at a sub $1,000. But I mean, the 3050 Ti, in terms of like desktop GPU, where does that performance lie? Is it
Um, it's so okay. It's honestly about a 1660,
okay? That's pretty
but
good.
it only has 4 gigs of RAM. So that
Okay.
kind of negates
Oof,
some
yeah.
of it because a lot of games now do need more than 4 gigabytes. And they're like, well, it can do ray tracing though. And it's like, yeah, but ray tracing uses a lot of memory. So
Yeah.
it really can't do ray tracing. And it's, let's be honest, probably not strong enough to do that. It can do DLSS though, which I suppose is a selling point for a low end laptop. But yeah, it's really the 4 gigabytes that makes it kind of questionable. But I think what they're planning to do, and some of this is hunch, some of this is from what I can tell, is there's a desktop 3050 coming out that should be based on the same die as the laptop 3050 Ti, possibly with more of its CUDA cores actually enabled on desktop with 8 gigabytes of RAM. I suspect they're doing this because they know if they get pushed out of low-end laptop, especially, I mean, like Rembrandt's going to be as strong as like a 1650 Max Q, possibly. Like, so there's no need for low-end NVIDIA graphics cards and
Yeah.
laptops anymore, at least not the recent ones. I think they're preparing desktop low-end cards because if they can't sell them into laptop channels, they're like, well, we got to do something with these dies. So again, I actually think, like you say, competition, I think people are underestimating how much it might heat up in the low end early next year.
That's really like I like I said, I'm always skeptical initially, but we'll see how this turns out because that is really awesome. Like the low end is a space that has needed competition for a long time, especially in terms of GPUs. You know, it's been pretty barren for ages. So if this is how this turns out, that'll be just so exciting, I think, and it'll help bring people back into the space as well because it'll make it viable to like buy more budget ended hardware, which is, let's face it, what most people buy. I think, you know, that's a very common point of entry for gaming systems.
The only thing I'm gonna say though, before we get excited, is it is all relative. The reason AMD sold the 6600 XT for $380 was because they knew that if they even kept the MSRP close to that, it would blow everything else on the street out of the water. And it's not that exciting that they basically launched 5700 XT performance with better efficiency for $20 less. What is it
Yeah.
then? A year later, or no, it'd be like a year and a half after the 5700 XT. I know that's not that exciting. That's the only thing I want to prepare people for these low-end launches is I don't expect them to be magical. I think it's very clear that, well, I don't honestly, back in 2010, almost every graphics card had pretty competitive price performance. Like I remember the 79, this is I guess 2012, but I remember the 7970 selling for about $500, about double the price of a 7850 for about double the performance of a 7850, and then you had $100 7750s. I don't remember any segment a decade ago really being that bad price performance, except for maybe the top one. And I think over time we've seen the mid-range become better price performance, and the low end was, but I just kind of feel like all of these companies are going to clearly push the best relative price performance in quotes to about the $500 to $600 range because they know that's what people are willing to pay. And it's the only thing I'm warning people about Navi 24 launching, Arc, and the 3050 is I'm not confident they'll look great relative to previous cards that were that price during the last mining bust, not mining boom. Like, for being honest, Navi 24 is probably going to be a $200 RX 590 with only 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's not that crazy. Okay, it uses half the energy. Sure.
Yeah. I mean,
what do you think about that though? I don't know if we just have to like make our peace with the fact that low end cards aren't going to be as good price performance anymore.
yeah, I mean that is the really disappointing thing because it, you know, where is progress? It really feels like this is the, like you were saying, the first time in ages where like just having a product available is kind of is winning the race.
I think the last launch
like,
was what, a 5500 XT or something? Like what was the last low end card?
Yeah, like it's the 1650 was also exciting ages ago, and that wasn't particularly exciting either. It was also just exciting because it was a 75-watt GPU that was more powerful than any 75-watt GPU before then. But like it is really difficult to be like, this is exciting considering that we may have stock available, but compared to you know previous generations, it's basically the same thing. I think we had this conversation last year about how the thing that is going to kind of revolutionize performance in, or it seems like it's going to, in the lower end is in the iGPU front, because that is one of the places where you can get like much lower system cost and you don't have to pay for like a PCB and all of that stuff. So it's like you can get more performance potentially for less money. So I think that's going to be the place where we see huge strides in performance, things like the RDNA 2 iGPUs and stuff like that, which will be more exciting. But then again, they're not going to compete with like the 3050 and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think.
Well, and it all comes down to what they actually charge for them, because this is the problem, you know. Those Cezanne APUs are like 180 millimeters squared, monolithic dies. Yields on them, I've heard, are like basically like they just stopped making the 4-core version because they don't need to disable them down to 4 cores ever. Like the yields are excellent. Yet they're selling them for like $350 on desktop. And I want to put things in perspective. So think about this. This is a monolithic 180 millimeter square die. There's no fan on it besides the fan you put on the motherboard. That's a lot cheaper than the fan on a graphics card. $350, that's $30 less than a 6600 XT that has a 237 millimeter square die and a much more expensive cooling system than that little APU. They're making a killing on these APUs on desktop right now. That's my only problem is I remember when these APUs were $150. And if Rembrandt was $150 on desktop, which there's no reason it couldn't be, like they'd make plenty of profit, I would be more excited. I just think a lot of the times now I'm just mostly excited for these APUs for laptop because I'm just not convinced they want to charge, especially when there's maybe they'll have to because now Intel has good CPUs. The other problem was that Cezanne APU was about as good at gaming as a 5800X, so they didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here, like at the moment, you can get a 5600G, which, it's a 6-core, 12-thread CPU for 290 Canadian dollars is what it's selling for on Amazon at the moment. And that has a Vega. So this doesn't have the Vega 3 in it. This has the Vega. Does it
I believe it. I'm pretty sure this has 7 compute units or something, if I remember off the top of my head. Where is it?
Yeah.
So it doesn't even have the full die. It has less compute units than the Steam Deck. I'm not that impressed that this is selling for the same price as an i5 12600K.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the thing is, the CPU that it's attached to is good, but like you said, the actual iGPU, and I was quite disappointed with this launch because
Cezanne, you mean?
Yeah, well, in terms of desktop Cezanne, because it's still got a Vega iGPU in it. I was really hoping that we were going to get a newer architecture. I know that it's like a refinement of it, but
yeah,
it's a powerful iGPU in terms of iGPUs, but
in terms of it has no competition.
Yes,
but
yeah, that's true.
And this is the thing I keep telling people is it just kind of seems like AMD is taking a page out of Intel's playbook and realizing it doesn't really benefit them to make a mega APU. Like if you look at their 12 nanometer APUs, those went up to, I believe, like above 200 millimeters squared, up 250 or more. There's no reason. Like Navi 24 is 16 compute units, 16 megabytes of infinity cache. There's no reason they couldn't fit that with 8 cores in the same die size as their old, whatever they were, those 11 compute unit 12 nanometer ones. There's no reason they couldn't do that right now. And that would, now with infinity cache, I mean, that would probably game, it'd probably game twice as well as Cezanne at least. And it's just, but I just don't think they're bothering to do it because they know most of these APUs will be used on laptop and they'll either be cut down and then be in a budget one, or they'll be paired with a graphics card. And so why would we use this die space on on integrated graphics that really only benefits low-end desktop? But they haven't even launched an R5 5600, let alone 5500X yet. They don't want to. They don't want low-end CPUs. Yeah. They want you to pay more.
And I mean, I wonder to what extent that also has to do with the fact that they're supplying APUs for both Microsoft and Sony. Because if you provide a powerful alternative to those companies, then it kind of makes the consoles, it kind of competes with the consoles. So and they then have to compete in terms of supply because how much difficulty are they having actually supplying these iGPUs or just these APUs for Sony and Microsoft already? So how much availability do they have left to spare for the desktop space? I'm sure they've got pretty serious contracts with those companies.
Oh yeah,
that kind of limit the extent to which they can supply that stuff. It'll be interesting to see to what extent that is one of the reasons that they are holding back in terms of the desktop APU space, because they're making so much money supplying to Sony and Microsoft that
I feel like we're just kind of dancing around the fact that when AMD was making APUs that were priced lower on desktop and relatively powerful, because again, like 8 Vega compute units, I think if you look at the die shots, it's like a fourth of the die is like they're not trying to make a powerful APU. It just so happens that Intel can't even compete with that right now, right? I just, when AMD was making these APUs that approached the performance of an RX 550, for example, and had a 4-core, 8-thread CPU with Zen 1 and was $150 or less, like, I don't think we can stop dancing around the fact that the reason they were doing that is because they had to compete with Intel and Nvidia, and now they don't.
Yeah.
Until Intel has either an i3 with 96 execution units, which right now all their desktop stuff has only 32, or I guess I don't know if the quad-core i3s will. They might actually. I wonder, it'd be hilarious if Intel all of a sudden made the best budget APU on desktop.
Yeah, that would be awesome though.
With Alder Lake. Like, until you have Intel really going for it, like launching a $150 Arc 6GB card, like I've leaked they could, until they actually do that, I just don't think AMD wants to launch a Rembrandt for 150 that probably outperforms the 5800X.
So at the end of the day, competition is what we need. We need these companies fighting each other, not us, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's all going to come down to maybe they will bring Rembrandt below Zen 4, because that's where they'll be like, well, yeah, this isn't as strong as Zen 4, so we'll release this to desktop because now it's justified. Happy holidays, everybody. Today's piece of content is sponsored by CDKeyoffers.com. This holiday season, I think there's a lot of things you might be shopping for when it comes to software, whether it's the latest PlayStation, Steam, Origin, or other gaming platform games, or if it's a key for Windows 10 Professional, Windows 11, or even Office 2021 to get gaming next year with a new build, or maybe to just stay productive at work. No matter what you need, whether it's for work or play, CDK Offers has you covered for a reasonable price. And in fact, you can save even more money than what you're seeing on screen if you use these offer codes that help Moore's Law is that if you use them, Broken Silicon gets you 30% off Windows keys, and Die Shrink gets you 3% off everything on the website, including games. So whether you're looking for a piece of software to occupy your leisure time over this holiday season, or you're looking for a reasonably priced Microsoft software, which usually, let's be honest, they're just not, go to cdkeyoffers.com today, use the link in the description, and, well, have a good holiday season where you don't overspend thanks to cdkeyoffers.com. Let's just switch right back to that. Speaking of competition, like, I don't even remember what we said last year. I think I already had a leak out about the top ARC graphics card at the end of last year that was pretty close to what it actually is. What did you expect out of ARC early 2021, and what are you expecting now?
Well, I mean, it always seemed like the initial launch for that was going to be essentially an OEM display adapter more than a graphics card, which was kind of what we got. I mean, there was a couple of pre-builds launched with one of those little baby Intel GPUs in it. Yes, there we go.
Yeah, DG1 you're talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know, like I really hope that it's going to be good and that it actually provides some reasonable competition. But at this point, I feel like we just need to wait and see, because even if it does, like, to what extent are they going to be able to provide availability for something like that, even if it is good?
Well, so what I can confirm, and I couldn't confirm for a while, but I've finally been given the okay to, is I do know how much GDR6 Intel's been stockpiling since Q3 last year. And they've stockpiled enough for at least 200,000 graphics cards already. And that was just in Q3. I don't know how much more they bought since then. So they're at least planning, it seems, to launch maybe 500,000 cards in the first half of next year. I don't know what the drivers will pan out. I think they probably will, because they're a big company. You'd hope they could at least brute force their way to decent drivers. But I think they actually will be able to supply a lot of cards. And let's remember, like, Nvidia, it's Samsung, but Nvidia just stopped making cards. Like, they can make more cards. I don't think these fabs are the bottleneck anymore. I think the bottleneck is all types of random stuff. In fact, when I say all types of random stuff, let me give you a crazy anecdote I heard from someone at AMD. So I heard that when they were, I won't say which component because I can't, but I don't want to completely give it away. But they were testing an upcoming like big product coming out like late next year, and they were resorting to buying fans from Amazon to cool them because they couldn't get enough from Delta for
Okay.
prototype testing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they were like literally those $20 CPU fans you see, like those no-name ones. They were just buying whatever they could find on Amazon, like in the labs at AMD, just so they could test prototypes. Like, so that's what's the holdup now, as far as I can tell, really is not fab capacity. It's just random crap, like power components, substrate to make the wafers. Like it's a nightmare, honestly, for them right now. I think they wish they could be so lucky that it was just yelling at TSMC to make more stuff. But like in the end, talking to people at Sony, they're just like, oh, now this one power supply supplier had a boat that's stuck in a port, so now we can't make more PS5s. Like these companies are not happy about that stuff. And then at the same time, I've also heard about warehouses of components being hoarded by, well, you know, people taking advantage of the situation. Like I've heard about a lot of people just stockpiling stuff people need because now is the time to do it and sell it only a little bit a week. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is they can launch a lot if they want to. So I'm not really that worried about that.
Out of curiosity, who is making the dies for Intel's up and coming GPUs?
TSMC, 6 nanometer.
Oh, TSMC 6 nanometer. Okay. Oh, wow. TSMC is raking it in.
Oh, God. They are just so rich now. And what I've heard is, and what I'm told consistently is they're not even really at capacity. That before the pandemic started, they turned down capacity because they were like, well, the world's ending, so we assume people will buy less stuff. No, wrong. Everyone's forced inside. They want to play video games. And so it actually takes about 6 months for them to up it again. So I think for the end of this year, they've been producing like twice as much stuff as they were previous quarters because they just had to get that stuff online that they were like kind of, I don't know if mothballing is the right way to put it, but they were just kind of shutting down some lines and then immediately were told, don't do that. And they had to just reboot everything up. So yeah, TSMC, they're the winners of 2021. That's for sure.
Yeah, are they a publicly traded company? How do we buy shares in
You
TSMC?
download the Robinhood app. You know, I used to own shares in them. I don't anymore. But yeah, I think their stock prices, I don't even know. It's at least quadrupled in the past like couple of years.
Oh wow!
Like they're the Pfizer of silicon. We'll say. But assuming there's a decent amount of, I'm trying to think of like possible scenarios to talk about this. Like, let's say, and you know, the GDR6 thing I told you, honestly, the amount of stock depends on how many of what model they make. Like if they're only making 6 and 4 gigabyte low-end cards, they can make 500,000. If they're only making high-end cards that have 16 gigabytes of RAM, well, okay, well now it's like 150,000. You know, now it's like about the same launch as the 6600 XT. But like, let's just say it's a mix and they launch, you know, let's if they launched 400,000, they would be launching, based on my understanding, is probably it's so hard to say because there's so many different channels they sell these cards in. But it seems like they would be selling triple or double what AMD did in Q3. Like, let's say they drop that just in Q1, in addition to what AMD and Nvidia are selling. Like, how do you expect that to pan out? Do you think people, will you buy one right away? How much do you think that will help? Because I'm really wondering how much of this pent-up demand, how much of it's been satiated. Because whether we like it or not, people are buying cards.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'd definitely buy one, but I'm gonna do a video on it. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the best kind of indicator for that kind of thing. I think it very much depends on how the reviews pan out for these cards, because you know, you were mentioning drivers before. If they have big driver problems, people that's really frustrating to deal with, and I think people would then be more reluctant to buy the Intel cards. Although if Intel has half a brain, which they're a massive company, so they probably do,
They got at least to have a third of one. I mean, come on with all that money.
At least a third. They could buy several if they wanted to. They'd go back and kind of figure out what has gone wrong for launches for people in past, which, you know, AMD has had issues. Well, Nvidia as well. Actually, everybody has driver issues.
Hmm.
with cards at launch. So if they recognize that as being a very important element to being competitive on the market, because they in terms of like software suites, software feature suites, I think that they're definitely gonna kind of lag behind companies like AMD and Nvidia. Things like DLSS and like ray tracing and stuff. Like I don't know how
I
many
just
of those.
I think of those things as wild cards. I expect it to be better than most people expect because I don't think they're stupid. I think they
Yeah,
know, they from what I've heard, ray tracing's actually at least as good as RDNA 2. Relatively speaking, like what does that even mean, right? As
yeah.
good as which card using how much energy. And I think XE super sampling might be good. The thing I
Okay.
don't know is like how finished will their driver menus be? Like that's the stuff I'm wondering. Like we have Wattman, we have Shadowplay, we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
Relive, we have Radeon Chill, we have like if I want to put in a custom desktop resolution, only Nvidia allows you to do that at stock for like years, and then AMD added it. Will Intel have that? Because that's a major problem I have with basically all laptops is that even if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can only control the custom resolution through the frickin' integrated Intel. Is that going to
Yeah.
be a problem on their desktop cards? I don't know.
No, for sure. Those quality of life things, which it that's not a raw performance issue,
No.
and those things are very important. If you're a content creator, for example, you need basic screen capturing to work, and a company like Nvidia, like we were talking about shadow play, and that stuff works really well. So if Intel doesn't provide a decent alternative to that, then I think that they're going to struggle. But like you said, they're a smart company. Hopefully, hopefully they've put two and two together and they know they need to do that properly.
And I'll say this too. I don't think I put this in any like leak videos yet, but I've actually heard that their built-in overclocking suite might be very, very good. Like we've seen
Oh, cool.
Intel Extreme Tuner or whatever it is. I
Yeah.
forgot. Basically, they might have that entire thing built in for the graphics card, like that fully featured overclocking, and that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But I have heard a contact ask an Intel person, like, so what about your Shadowplay or Relive competitor? And Intel was like, no comment. Like, that's what I'm worried about is
Yeah.
I think everything we're talking about, I'm not really worried about ray tracing, XE super sampling. I don't know if I'd say I'm worried. I just don't know what to expect, how good it will be. I assume it will at least be decent. I think one thing will fall short. And if it's my guess, it's probably their recording stuff. That just
Oh,
sounds
that's
like
so
something they
annoying.
haven't talked about yet, though, right? We don't really see them talking about it. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
sure they'll have something. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll have
Yeah.
something for recording built in. But I use NVIDIA's GeForce Experience to record right now because I have a 3070.
Mm.
Before that, I had a Radeon 7 and I use Relive. Man, those things work great. It's so
Yeah. So
convenient
well.
for
Yeah.
making videos for YouTube, even, that I would be scared to switch to Arc if I didn't know it had a fully featured recording software built in.
For sure. And if it has a competitor to like the NVENC encoder, because the NVENC encoder is so powerful as well. Like it's such a useful thing. Um.
I have heard that we should expect them to possibly be like factors of tens better at some encoding tasks, though,
Oh,
because
okay. That's promising.
now, I don't. The problem is I don't know how much of their internal like they'll do these like Intel Direct internal memos to employees, and they'll like show off. One of them they beat a 3080 by a factor of 100. I don't know how cherry picked that was. You can't
Oh,
tell me that
yeah.
wasn't a cherry pick benchmark, though.
Yeah, Intel never cherry picks
Yeah,
benchmarks, though. They've never done that before. So,
but if you think about how good their integrated graphics encoder is, which relatively speaking is really good, I guess scale that up times 100 in performance. That's kind of what I'm hoping we'll get. But again, will it work in every app? Will every app be patched to make use of it when it comes out? I don't know yet. You
and
know,
yeah, and there are always teething problems with a new product launch, even if it's from a company that's been established in the space. It's just, the first couple of months may be a bit rocky, and then they'll get there. Like if the hardware is decent, then the software can follow. They can eventually sort that stuff out. Although someone was talking about one of the big review channels was talking about how the day one reviews are the ones that are
mm,
referenced by everyone forever, basically. Like
Pretty much, yeah. Like 80% of people only look at the day one review, if not 99%.
Yeah, and that could be a big problem for Intel potentially if they do have some of these quality of life issues with drivers and stuff. So yeah, hopefully they figure that out.
So that's the thing, though. I know that they've basically had prototypes run in games since 3-4 months ago. Like they have
Okay.
that done. My understanding, though, is that the whole reason it's not even out yet is they want the drivers to be perfect.
Okay.
Now, there's two ways to interpret that. Either that means they're a mess, or that means they want them to be perfect. The truth's probably a bit of both, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I've heard about, I of course won't say which games because it could give away people, but like some of the games they've done, like there's a Battlefield comparison one where they were comparing the performance of one of their mid-range ones, not the top end. And it was competitive with like a 3060, but it wasn't the latest or even the one before it, Battlefield. It was like a I won't say which was a Battlefield from a while ago.
Okay.
And like one of my contacts raised his hand in the press in the event, in the internal event, was like, "Why are you using that game?" They're like, "Oh, just, you know." I'm like, I'm guessing it's because for some reason there's some critical error in Battlefield 5 or something that they can't fix, you know?
Or that Battlefield really likes Intel GPUs for some reason. That's just the highest performing.
Yeah.
It's like the one that really hates Nvidia and really likes Intel. That's why they went that route.
Well, and you know, I went to Notebook Check because I was looking at like various handheld gaming PC devices because I'm less interested in the Steam Deck and more interested in something that's like, you know, 3DS or PSP sized, because I don't feel like I'm ever going to use. I'm not using Steam Deck to play Halo competitively, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like so I don't really need the performance. What I need it is to run single player or indie games okay. And I looked at the notebook performance of the existing Tiger Lake APU that has 96 execution units, which is actually quite a bit. It's actually about as strong as the MX450. And it was. Like in Grand Theft Auto 5, it's like, oh, wow, 1080p, medium settings at 60 frames, if I remember correctly. But then I went, Far Cry 6 won't boot. Halo Infinite won't boot. Like, I was like, what the heck? Like, and they're like, dude, this has been out for half a year, Tiger Lake graphics. Like, you can't boot Far Cry 6? Really? That's insane. And that's what gives me pause, though.
Yeah, no, because I've been playing a lot with the iGPUs in Alder Lake, and they have a bunch of weird issues as well. Like, for example, screen capturing. Just I couldn't even get an external device to screen capture the iGPU's footage for some reason. Like it's just all kinds of weird issues like that. So yeah, We'll just have to wait and see with software.
Well, and so I guess the thing I would say is, I think what we're seeing, and a lot of this opinion is informed by, again, talking to just some of it's maybe just one data point or anecdotal, but it's still talking to like a dozen people who have these, you know, OEM, or not OEM, I should say, pre-built companies, or maybe like not a mom and pop, but like a smaller one that sells like 1,000 graphics cards a month, and they do pre-builts, like people like that. And yes, people are buying RDNA 2 graphics cards above MSRP, but they're not willing to spend as much over MSRP as they are for Nvidia. Nvidia's Mindshare is still king when it comes to graphics cards. And I was at the Carolina Game Summit, and I actually did a couple streams from a hotel room that one of my friends had there, who's a distributor, and he had the entire background was a pile of 3090s and 3070 Ti's. And I was like sitting on a chair I had constructed out of 3090 boxes, and I did the live stream like that. Like, hey guys, they're making graphics cards. Like,
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, the people at that event, the Carolina Game Summit, there were like maybe a dozen people there doing this. Like they worked with their distributors at EVGA. They had got as many of these graphics cards as they could to sell in person at a Game Summit, because they were like, we know these are going to gamers here. This is per person sales. And they would like keep their graphics cards in their hotel room and then ferry down 20 at a time to the event center. So there's no way someone could steal 100 graphics cards, you know, which again, these graphics cards are selling for $2,000, 100 times $2,000, guys.
Yeah.
He's $200,000 worth of merchandise. So he had all these expensive things there. And he's like, here's the thing. The 6700 XT, most of the time people will come into my store and go, oh, let me know if you get one for under 600. Oh, let me know if you get one, for 500. And it's like, but we're not going to. We're paying more for them too, dude. Like, we can't get them for that much. And then, like the 6800 XT, and like, oh, if you can get one for under 1,000. When it came to the 3070, they'd pay 1,000. And I saw it in person at that Game Summit, people in a line buying 3070 Ti's for $1,200 happily. What I'm kind of getting to is, I think what AMD's, I would say a hard lesson, an unfortunate lesson, because I don't necessarily think it's fair. But I think an unfortunate lesson AMD's learning is that they can match the MSRP or they can undercut Nvidia less than they did before. Like the 290X was like half the price of a Titan. They don't need to do that. They can just be 10, 20% cheaper and people will buy them. But they're not going to pay as much more for over MSRP as they will for Nvidia. I think when a lot of the enthusiasts, and I agree there's the percentage online is more willing to get AMD than in the real world, as we might call it. But I do think that still, once you get to that enthusiast tier, they just kind of are more wanting NVIDIA. And I think the more you go down into the low end, the less they're willing to pay over MSRP. And I think that's where AMD is going to have to learn, and I'm guessing has learned by now, that whatever they end up doing, they can't expect people to buy 6600 XT for like $1,000, even if people will buy like a 3060 for $1,000 or something. And I think that's just true in general, though, too. The lower you get down in the product stack, who's looking for $300 graphics cards? Probably people less willing to be gouged.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I think also, with that space, like the real hardcore enthusiast is also not willing to be gouged at all. Like, I think the people who have been following the hardware space for a long time, the idea of paying above MSRP is is sacrilege, which makes sense. I do agree with that. So I think that considering that they may potentially anecdotally be AMD's demographic, that it's like more willing to buy AMD, that it's a bit of a double whammy. Not only are they budget buyers who are less willing to be gouged, but they're also more informed enthusiasts that are also, on top of that, less willing to be gouged.
And yeah, more stubborn, like just not willing to give into it. And I think AMD fans are more stubborn about paying over MSRP. And what I'm finally getting to is, I think Intel has an opening here where if they nail their drivers, if they have enough performance, I'm under the impression they may launch a $500 card as strong as a 3070 Ti with double the RAM. Like, I think this is something we may be looking at. We may look at a $350 12 gigabyte card that's just maybe a hair weaker than a 6700 XT. Like, I think we could be seeing some pretty cool stuff. However, I hope Intel knows that, well, their Mindshare is probably going to work really well in OEM pre-builts, because they'll be like, ooh, an all Intel system.
Yeah.
That's the people buying pre-builts. When it comes to selling on Newegg, I think Intel needs to understand that I don't think people are going to pay over MSRP for their cards. At least I think whatever you think of in terms, I suspect, I don't know, we'll see. Whatever you expect out of AMD fans' stubbornness, or I guess people's stubbornness to buy an AMD card over MSRP, I think double that for Intel, because they're so unproven.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because especially if they have like initial launch reviews that are critical of software support, people are not going to want to buy those cards for any markup, because then you not only do you pay a bunch extra for it for an unproven product, and you have to struggle with it. Like that's just not worth it. You were saying just now they were selling 3070s for like $1,200.
3070 Ti's.
Oh, okay, 37, because you can buy. NZXT has like a build kit, which is like basically they just send you a box full of PC components and you build it yourself, with a 3070 and a 5600X in it for $1,700. So you get you get a whole PC with the graphics card, and
which you can at least sell off half of it, and you probably got it for $900 or something. Then yeah,
that's
well, and the craziest one for me as well is, the A series cards and the W6000 professional cards, like no one should get a 3090 for $4,000 if the A6000 with 48 gigabytes of RAM and more CUDA cores is like 4,800. I'm like, at this point, dude, you're clearly just willing to spend whatever. Get the it's like gold plated. Get the biggest thing you can. You can tell everyone you have 48 gigabytes of RAM, and there's the A5000 with 24 gigabytes of RAM, which is based on the same die as the 3090, although it's probably closer to a 3080 in performance, a lot closer to that. But it's $3,000, so it uses 230 watts too. It uses 100 watts less than the 3090. And I tested an A6000. Nope, it's as strong as a 3080 Ti, and it uses less than 300 watts. It's really impressive, actually, how good those professional cards are.
Yeah, so we should all be buying Quadros, basically, is the...
I mean, that's where we're at, honestly. I think, and I just tested the A4000. It's basically a 16 gigabyte 3060 Ti that uses 140 watts. It uses a single 6-pin. It uses no energy. It's hilarious. Like, if you can get that for $1,200, I'm like, well, you're getting ripped off for gaming, but at least you get 16 gigs of RAM and get to brag you have a professional graphics card. But you know what? Speaking of expensive graphics cards, something I'm going through the script here that I think we should get to. There were rumors of a 3090 Ti for a while. And at first I was like, I mean, they can launch whatever they want, guys. It's the same die. If they want to launch something 5% stronger, go for it. But I'm not talking about this because I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. But then I got info from OEMs that are like, no, we're literally speccing out systems for a 450 watt card right now. I just want to know what you think about. I mean, Ampere was already pushing power usage. What do you think about 450 watts coming to desktop?
Yeah, that's just insane because, like, how are they gonna get the graphics card to not explode with that kind of power draw? Because
they are exploding right now.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. If you play New World with that thing, you are going to cause it's going to cause a fission reaction. Like I don't know. I mean, they're gonna sell them. Like if they come out, a lot of people are gonna buy them. It doesn't, but.
And there's rumors of a 3080 12 gigabyte, not 3080 Ti, 3080 12 gigabyte as well. So I think what they're doing is as yields have gotten better, they're just going to be like, yep, we're going to launch the full die as a 3090 Ti, and that's probably going to be $2,000 if I had to guess. And then we're just going to discontinue the 3090, and then we're going to launch a 3080 12 gigabyte. Honestly, probably for like $900 to $1,000. And then this is our way of upping prices and having stronger cards because that's going to be right when ARC launches, so they'll have to refresh their lineup for that. And that's also, I think, when we might get a 6 nanometer RDNA 2 refresh, at least in laptop. So I think we need to actually be ready for quite a few launches in the first half of next year.
I'll be sure to make a video on a 12-year-old graphics card that can't run any games on those launch days. Because
just completely meme it and do 3090 Ti versus GT 310M.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
might literally be 100 times stronger. I bet it is.
If you can find if you can find a game that has an engine that scales up enough to really show that difference. Because like with Half-Life 2, for example, which is a game that I use a lot. Yeah, which I use a lot to showcase lower end and older hardware.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and because it scales really well, but it tops out at 300 frames per second, and then so it's.
I use the Lost Coast benchmark for that.
Yeah, okay.
Of course, I've stopped doing that like a year ago because even integrated graphics were starting to push 300 frames in that game.
Yeah, no, for sure. You need to really dig hard to find a graphics card that can't properly run Half-Life 2.
Yeah, the reason I actually brought up the 3090 Ti because I don't think the discussion about pricing or performance is really that interesting. I think we probably agree there's almost no chance it's going to be 1,500. Like they're not going to slot this in where the old one is. This is a chance to raise prices, I think, and I think we know its performance at most will be 10% better. Although, frankly, I think above 5% will almost surprise me. I mean, there's only so. I mean, the die is almost fully enabled already. They can add 4% more CUDA cores and about 5% more bandwidth. So I guess then they might push core clocks, and that's why it's 450 watts. I guess looking at 7-8%, but The most interesting thing to talk about that card to me is, in your opinion, is 450 watts too much? And if it's not, what would be? If you had to guess, like, is there a point where I don't care how strong it is with it? I'm just not telling people to buy this.
Well, I feel like even 350 is a lot. Like if it at that point, you're getting to a situation where there are a lot of external factors that kind of affect the system that you need to put the card in. You need good enough airflow. You need a decent power supply that's not going to struggle with that card, and it's like
Which
450s
which right now aren't like 1,000 watts sometimes struggling with the 3090, or like I think 750s definitely must be.
Yeah, so I think it has more to do with how like the how just good the 12-volt rail is.
Sure.
So if it you can get like a lower wattage power supply that can handle it just because it's a beefcake power supply in terms of its 12-volt rail. But yeah, like a 450-watt graphics card is just gonna, yeah, I don't know, but I feel like the type of person that's gonna buy a card like that, those considerations don't really matter. At that point, it's kind of an EPN purchase, right? It's the biggest card they make. I have the biggest card, yay! I feel like, yeah,
I benchmarked against the A6000, which I was, less than 300 watts, cool and quiet, and for the performance, which again was just so weird having that level of performance with it being silent and using under 300 watts. The 3080 Ti I benchmarked against it, which tied it, traded blows in games. And I mean, I pushed overclocking a bit. I got like to 400 watts of power usage while pushing performance at maybe 5-7%. And I could have pushed it more, but I said, I just refuse to use more than 400 watts in my DTX case.
Yeah.
Like, this is absurd. But that level of heat was just insane. And I have air conditioning, guys, listening. Like, it wasn't even like just the air conditioning. It was like the it still dumps heat next to you. Like, it's not instantly being pulled into the vents. Like, I just feel like the people that buy 450 watt card are going to be in a rude awakening in most rooms for
Yeah.
what that really means. It's just, and I guess what I'm kind of leading to is, have you heard about the rumors that Lovelace may use over 500 watts?
So why are they having to push wattage so hard to get more performance out of these cards?
So it comes down to really always competition. Nvidia, look how well Maxwell overclocked. They didn't need to push it. It was winning, and they didn't need to push Pascal that hard either. Great overclockers. But I think with Ampere, Nvidia underestimated AMD, pushed their cards extra hard, and they're on an 8 nanometer node. They're on a less efficient node than AMD too. So there was a lot more penalty to push the cards so they could stay ahead or at least tie the top AMD cards. That's kind of what it sounds like might be going on with Lovelace versus RDNA 3. Most people I ask say RDNA 3 is going to win. And internally at AMD, they're walking around cocky. Like, they're like, oh no, every quote I got about RDNA 2 was, we think we're going to win at some things and we're really excited to be at the top end again. But they weren't sure. When I ask AMD people about RDNA 3, they're just like, we're excited to win next year. Like, because that's how confident they are. And it's because I believe they're going to multi-GPU or multi-dies like Zen does now.
Okay.
And so it sounds kind of like, and again, don't quote me, guys, it sounds like it's just 2 to 4 compute unit dies if you look at Zen 3D, on a tile or a layer of infinity cache or on top of it, like 512 megabytes. Like, so it's not going to be a cheap card to make, but it sounds like they could double performance over what we have now again. If they do that, I think Lovelace was always looking at being about 60 to 80% better than Ampere. But I've had several people say, I bet they can get to double, though, if they pushed above 500 watts. And then months later, I saw rumors coming out of 500 watt test units. And I'm like, I think Nvidia has a monolithic card still that's just an insane die size. I think AMD has finally gotten their like Ryzen approach working with graphics cards, and so it's not using as much energy. Although I've heard the AMD one may use 400 watts,
Okay.
and so it's not like it's necessary. But at least it's spread out across two dies, so it won't be as dense heat. Although it doesn't really affect you, you're still going to get warm. And I think Nvidia doesn't want to lose. That would be why. We'll have to see how it pans out. But like, what would you think about? And let's just say it's 90% stronger than a 3090, but it uses 550 watts.
I mean, that's like 550 watts is crazy because then you literally have a little space heater next to you as opposed to a. So I guess it depends on where you live. If you if you live in the Arctic, yeah, dope, get one of those. That's a great way to cool your house, to heat your house. But if you live in sub-Saharan Africa, you probably
it might
shouldn't get
literally
one.
be dangerous to even boot it up there. Like, it
Yeah,
just won't work.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess like 90% performance boost for that kind of power. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I kind of need some time to come to terms with that. I guess it would be interesting to see what that feels like in a room, because like it would be interesting to see, because that is a really big. That's quite a big performance
Sure.
increase. Although I do have a question. Sorry, I'm going to kind of sidestep your question here.
Sure.
I don't really know
Sure.
know what else to say. But in terms of the 3D stacking, how does cooling work for that? If you have like
Yeah.
die components underneath other die, like how does that work? Do you?
So I can't say that I have like any. I mean, there are diagrams out there, but any diagrams that I'm sure is like a final design. So I can't comment on like what a specific product will do.
Okay.
What it sounds like though is, I think the first thing we have to look to is whatever AMD is going to manage to do with Zen 3D, because my understanding, like kind of the skinny of all of this, is that they thought RDNA 3, they weren't sure if it would be monolithic or not.
Okay.
They were sure they could get something out. It sounds like there were probably some designs at some point that had. They weren't sure if they get monolithic or get multi-GPU working effectively without massive heat issues, which for those who don't know, a lot of my early Arc leaks were Intel trying to get multi-GPU working for DG2. They wanted that to be a multi-die GPU. And I remember in end of 2019, or it may have been beginning, I think it was beginning of 2020, I had information from a source I'm very sure of that was pointing to these cards that they already had before Ampere was even out, that were better than a 2080 Ti, but they used 1,000 watts of energy at Intel. And the reason they did is because sending energy between two dies uses a lot of energy. Like, that's so much energy unless you get something like Infinity Fabric or whatever AMD's managed to do with Ryzen working well. So basically, AMD wasn't sure if they'd nail that and nail the bandwidth issues of trying to communicate. I mean, graphics cards use so much more bandwidth than CPUs. Getting them to not be bandwidth constrained on multiple dies is an issue. But then they got Infinity Cache working. Not just Infinity Cache, but Vcache on Zen 3D working. And that's when they went, oh, I don't think we're going to make something just 50% better, which, just so people know, there were monolithic designs for RDNA 3 that had 96 compute units, higher clock speeds, and a 384-bit bus. So that was their backup plan, to be launch something like 50% better. But now they've got multi-GPU working. That's probably what they're going to go with. They think they can double performance. And if it's just Vcache, not to just take forever to actually answer your actual question.
Oh, no, don't worry.
They act like that's not an issue. Like, if you look at what they said about Zen 3D in public interviews so far, they're like, actually, it's not a big problem. We just, the layer is so thin, it doesn't affect cooling that much. But that's what they're saying. I want to see a Zen 3D chip tested that actually can boost high without throttling, because that's what they're doing, is putting the cache, just a layer that's crazy thin of cache, just directly on top of the die. And supposedly it's thin enough that it doesn't affect cooling that much.
Okay. That's interesting, because every time I heard about that kind of, the design technique, it sounds really awesome, but that was my thought, was like, how do you
Yeah.
cool components through other components? Yeah, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Well, they managed to get it to work with HBM, but there are issues like I remember Vega and especially the Theory X. Like, there's a reason it was liquid cooled for the top model. It's not because it actually used about the same amount of energy as a 980 Ti. It actually wasn't inefficient. It's just you had like, I don't remember, what is it, like 3 or 4, I think, or 8, I don't remember, stacks of RAM on top of each other in the HBM. The bottom one was way hotter than the top one. And so they had to keep the top stack below 70 degrees so the bottom stack wouldn't overheat and cause errors. So they got it to work, though, all the way back then with a similar situation. You know, it just all depends on how much heat parts of the die are going to use, because I think a lot of people, including me, have been assuming that the Infinity cache will be maybe actually below the dies, and then they'll put the dies on top, and that's because the cache won't get as hot. But that also means that if the GPU gets hot, isn't that just going to overheat the thing on the bottom then?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why Zen 3D is putting the cache on top of the die, because it gets hot, but at least they're pulling the heat out of it.
Yeah.
And my honest answer can be boiled down to, I'm not sure. You know, and I think there's been a lot of wild rumors,
Okay.
as usual, about RDNA 3's performance. Like, some people claiming it's over 3 times stronger than the 6900 XT, to which I'm like, doubt. Press the doubt button on that one.
Yeah.
And I think it's because people see some of the configurations being tested, and they're like, well, it's on 5 nanometer, so I'm sure it'll run at 3 gigahertz. And then no, it's like, if they have to cool Vcache on it, if they have multiple dies, and then they have to worry about heat penalties to sending energy between the dies, I don't think they're going to probably clock it as high as RDNA 2. No one will be happier than me if they have a 3 gigahertz 160 compute unit card, you know. But everyone I talk to at AMD says there's some real heat problems they're running into. And it's probably just going to come down to lower clock speeds. And we're going to have to see, you know. I don't know. It's probably going to be expensive.
Yeah. And like, how driver-wise, how are drivers going to interact with the dual GPUs? Because I know with, like, you know, a GTX 295, for example, those like older dual GPU single PCB graphics cards, they were 2 graphics cards essentially on the same PCB. So drivers, you know, you'd have issues like micro stutters and stuff because of having to sync those 2 together. So because of Infinity Cache, is that not going to be an issue, or?
I mean, all they've done with any of those graphics cards, to my knowledge, is just literally put, like, the 690 was literally 2 680 dies. That's all it is. You know, it's like, no, quite literally, they didn't even bother to try to do anything special.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard interviews from Nvidia from back then where they said they were trying to get it to work every now and then. It never seemed to work.
Okay.
And AMD has been trying to get this to work since RDNA 1. Intel's been trying to get this to work since DG1.
Yeah.
It sounds like AMD finally got it to work where the OS only sees it as a single graphics card.
Okay.
It can't even recognize the 2 different dies, which is the only way this makes any sense for gaming anyways. It's just give up. They're never going to make Crossfire work, guys. I think this is obvious. And there's multiple ways they can do that. I've heard about this idea of like a master and slave die. So like literally they may have a big die that has a little bit of extra silicon and that can delineate to slightly smaller dies they can add on after it. And the OS can only see the master die. You know, that's one way you can do it. You can literally just make the same die twice and just disable part of it so it can't be recognized by the OS, but it's the same compute units and everything. It just doesn't have the interface, you know? So there's ways they can do this. Again, you know, I'm sure of this source. Like, I was told Intel had stuff like this working. It was just so inefficient. It was worse than having a monolithic die. So they were like, we're not going to bother.
Yeah.
Although for those wondering, I haven't said that. I guess by the time this comes out, I'll probably have said this publicly. Intel is very confident about 2023 as well, and they're going to be multi-GPU. So I guess let me say that if Nvidia doesn't figure it out by 2023, they could be in big trouble here. But this isn't supposed to be talking about 2023 products. So.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, this is something I talked about in my RDNA 3, RDNA 4 leak this year. how do you feel about prices going up? Because they're going to. I mean, come on. Going up, but then performance doubling. Like, how would you feel if the 8700 XT, so not RDNA 3, RDNA 4 in 2024, how would you feel if that was 4 times stronger than a 6900 XT, but it was $700 for a 8700 XT? So now the 700 XT is 700, the 8800 is probably 1500, the 8900 is 2500, and then the 8600 is probably $500. How do you feel about that though if each one of those is 4 times stronger than what we have now?
Well, I grew up in Southern Africa, and their inflation was, or just is, a very kind of real part of life. So like the first GPU that I bought, or that I got, was an X1900 XTX, which I think at the time in the US cost $500, and in Namibia, where I grew up, it cost 5,000 rand, the equivalent of 5,000 rand. So it's pretty much a 1 to 10 conversion. Like 2 or 3 generations later, it was in the US, the kind of like that high-end tier GPU was still $500, but in Southern Africa, you'd have to spend 7,000 or 7,500 rand for it. And that kind of trend continued through the entire time that I was a PC enthusiast. So that kind of inflation, I am very used to, if that makes sense. Like, that's always been a part of my experience as a hardware enthusiast, is that every generation, the card is going to be more expensive just because. And then when it started compounding, when the inflation started hitting the US, it was like double inflation in in Southern Africa.
I think so many people don't get that, by the way, in the US, that are just like, oh, inflation isn't that big of a deal. It's like, dude, do you guys understand that every time, because the oil's pegged to the US dollar, the US has inflation, the rest of the world feels it times 10? Like, it sucks, dude. Inflation sucks. You're the ones who don't have the worst part of it.
Yeah, exactly. I was so jealous of consumers in the US because I was like, yeah, stuff's so cheap there, you know? So I feel like I would be understanding of it just because of my framework of reference in terms of that. But I think that a lot of people would be very unhappy with it because, you know, it makes sense. As time goes on, we want better stuff for the same amount of money. That's what progress is. So it's understandable that it's upsetting, but I think that kind of inflation is just the reality of the world.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people will be mad, but again, I made a devil's advocate argument though in that video, just because, look, anyone can say I'm mad that the mid-range is double the price now. Like, let's be honest, if it's $700, that means that used to be $350, you know? But if it's 4 times, let's say that 8700 XT, and again, this is 3 years from now, so this is 2 gens away. Let's say it manages to be twice the performance of a 6900 XT, though. Is that not worth 700? Do you think people will complain? And I understand games get harder to run, but I don't know. I think a lot of that was because we went from, I don't know, right? What even was it? Like 1280 by 1024 to like 1680 by 1050 to a 1080p to 1440p and 1600p. I don't know if we're going past 4K. Like, and it's pretty doable to do 4K 120 right now.
Yeah.
Quadruple performance, even if games get harder to run. I don't know. Like, do you think that anyone will complain though if the 8600 XT is $500, but it's capable of 4K 120 gaming?
I think what is important in a situation like that is that there still are options for 350. And, you know, at the lower price points, I think like at that point, it doesn't really matter what they call. Well, I mean, it does matter what they call it, but as long as there are options for people who don't have the option to spend $500 on a graphics card, I think it'll be fine. You know, if as long as the performance is there and there are options at all of the price points that are viable, then it should be okay, I think, in my opinion. But
the one thing I will say though is I literally had someone at AMD say we want to kill the sub $400 market. It's a direct
rough.
quote. And trust me, Nvidia wants to kill the sub $500 market too. So
Yeah, that's really bad because it makes PC gaming more exclusive, and it makes it more it excludes a lot of people from a really awesome hobby. But at the same time, it means that then if you are in that position where you can't afford to buy a graphics card over $400, then you have to kind of go into the used market and find a way to essentially like hustle a
that's
product.
what they said. They said, we want
Yeah.
our old used cards to be the sub $400 market within 5 years. Like, we don't even want to bother there anymore.
That's quite disappointing to hear from the companies, because I feel like those segments are so important. Those lower end segments, because it's one of the really appealing things about gaming, about PC gaming over console gaming, is that you can cobble together like low cost systems that perform really well and are very customizable. So if the companies don't make GPUs, because a $200 new GPU turns into a $100 used GPU, or whatever that conversion is. So a $400 GPU isn't going to turn into a like inexpensive. Yeah, it's not going to turn into a GPU for people who don't have a lot of disposable income, which is a huge amount of people. So
Well, that's definitely true. The only other thing I would say to that, though, is, I mean, at the end of the day, though, APUs would also be stronger. I don't know how, and I think that's a reason. I think also a reason they're not making the GPUs and these APUs crazy strong is it just has to do a certain amount. And the fact is, Cezanne can play pretty much any game out there, even if you really have to do low settings.
Yeah.
I mean, by then, we'd probably have APUs as strong as a 6600 XT, I would imagine, at least. And as those were $200, it's hard, though, because that's not going to run the latest AAA game very well.
Yeah.
But if everyone's still playing Fortnite, I don't know. Those games are so easy to run,
Yeah, and to be fair, the latest AAA titles are usually terrible anyway. So you're not missing out on too much. What are you going to play? Cyberpunk or like the new Battlefield, which is also broken?
I like the new Battlefield, and yes, it is a little broken.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a Battlefield game. It's going to take it 6 months, and then it's going to be amazing. So I'm just waiting. I love Battlefield. I've loved the series for ages, but with every game from Battlefield 3. I'd never bought it within the first 6 or 7 months of it being out, because
would you say the worst one at launch was Battlefield 4?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the only thing I will say is that Battlefield 2042 works way better than 4 did or 3 did at launch. It's just, I think our standards, and this is good, have gotten better. Yeah. And also there's more competition. Like now, Modern Warfare has a 64-player game mode with vehicles. Like you can't just churn out broken games anymore, companies.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think it's so difficult to make games. Like you need to, because of how powerful graphics cards and stuff have become, it's at the point where you have to spend millions upon millions of dollars to make a game, and it's this really complex undertaking. So I guess that's why they're so broken.
So then delay it, dude. Just don't launch it.
I agree. I completely agree. But I think that's the kind of like that's the devil's advocate argument behind why they're all broken, is because it's so difficult.
You know what's fascinating though? There's been 3 or 4 patches since launch already, and none of them added new bugs.
Oh, that's good. That's
I
very
the look on your face, and I'm like, I was talking to my brother Dan. Has DICE ever had a patch that didn't add a new bug until now? Like, at least they're taking it seriously. I honestly, my mind, they've redone the UI, they've added new game modes and maps, and I'm like, and no bugs? Maybe you're taking the criticism seriously.
Yeah, because apparently they lost like half their player base in the first week or something. I read it. It was just, I didn't read the whole article. It was just, I'm just headline quoting here, but
well, right. And yeah, I think it's doing better than Battlefield 5 did, but that wasn't a particularly popular one. I think a lot of people too they're like, I'll play it again in 2 months when it's fixed. I think honestly, like a lot of it is literally people going, dang it, I was hoping this one would work at launch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I haven't bought it yet because I'm going to wait 6 months and then I'm going to play it a lot. I'm really excited for it. Although I play a lot of Escape from Tarkov, so I'm used to the broken games.
Mhm.
But they do good work as well. They try hard with their patches, even though each patch does break stuff.
It's just why? Like, come on, guys. But I guess the last thing I would add to that, just because you'd probably be interested to hear this, I had a dev on from Obsidian Entertainment was the last guest,
Oh,
and he was. I talked to him about what was going on with Battlefield, and he was like, "Just so you know, those 4 patches in a month, multiple 6 figures per patch for them to do it that quickly."
oh wow.
And Sony and Microsoft charge per patch they put out on the console because
Oh.
they want to incentivize you releasing working stuff. So if anyone's wondering, EA's paying for paying for the mistake they just made.
Good. EA is the worst company ever. They need to pay. Like, I'm happy with that.
I get the feeling they're learning their lesson. I just don't know why it took 5 broken launches for them to learn it.
Yeah.
They fired the guy in charge of DICE though, so you wonder how much of it is, he was in charge, I think, since Battlefield 3 or something. So I wonder how much of these broken launches are. But then it's like, why was he doing it 4 times in a row? I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's get back on subject though. I love having
Oh
a little
yeah,
bit of
yeah.
game talk in there.
Sorry.
No, it's definitely my fault. Let me throw this in. So Zen 3D, then Raptor Lake, then Zen 4, or maybe Raptor Lake and Zen 4 will, maybe Zen 4 will come before Raptor Lake. I doubt it, but we'll see. Like, which of these, how excited are you for Zen 3D? And then are you more, I don't know how much you know, but how excited are you for Raptor Lake versus Zen 4?
Um, well, I mean, in terms of Zen 3D, I think it's really cool because it's such an interesting kind of way of designing a CPU that is they're going to have to make design decisions like this to overcome the limitations of silicon. You can't just like die shrink anymore. You need to
Mm-hmm.
come up with creative ways to improve performance. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how it stacks up and how they deal with things like cooling. That from an engineering perspective, Zen 3D is amazing. Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake, again, it's just competition is exciting to watch. So I don't know a huge amount about what's expected, but I think it's going to be great because both of these companies are knife battling in the street essentially, and that's always entertaining to watch. So
Oh, perfect. I wanted to switch to this subject next, and this next reader mail is exactly what I wanted to talk about. Kronos1996 writes in, and he says, I've heard a lot of confusion from the rumor mill about how a potential 24 or 32 core AM5 chip would fit into AMD's overall CPU lineup. The concern seems to be, from what I can tell online, that it would cannibalize Threadripper sales and blur the line between consumer and HEDT platforms. I don't think those arguments hold any weight, though. For starters, the Ryzen 9 already blurred the line between consumer and HEDT, so clearly AMD has shown this to be part of their MO. Why wouldn't they do it again? The EPYC chips are going up to 96 and then 128 cores with Zen 4 Threadripper. Why not have the consumer also go up 50%? The main reason I think it would also make sense to have a 24 or 32 core Ryzen part is they could use Zen 4C. They could have 8 Zen 4 plus 16 Zen 4C for a 24 core part. And Zen 4 Ryzen 9 would then just completely beat Raptor Lake in multi-threading at a very efficient TDP that doesn't require 4 CCD chiplets. How does this relate to cannibalizing Threadripper? People who buy Threadripper are after far more than just cores, namely I/O. And I wrote down a lot of opinions about this question here, but let me just ask you, would you buy more than a 16-core processor, though, next year?
it completely depends on pricing. $500 is already very high for me to spend on a CPU. Like even if it's for content creation, even if it's for like my work system, I struggle to pay $500 for the 5900X. Just mentally, I find it like
I understand,
yeah. It just seems like a lot to spend on a CPU. So if they can give us 16 cores for $500, like that would be good. But I wouldn't spend more to get it. If
Then
that makes sense.
500.
Yeah. My personal, that's like a high cap for me in terms of content creation, and in terms of gaming, like 350 is like where I top out. So whatever they can give me for that amount is what I'll buy, basically.
Well, you know, I managed to get the 3950X launch week.
Okay.
And for me, that was kind of just a special. I would honestly, I rarely pay more than $500 for a graphics card, and if ever. And I like never really pay more than $400 for a CPU, but it was like this is the first 16-core desktop processor. For me, it was just a special occasion. It's just like
for sure,
they've just increased IPC by 15% and doubled core count at the same power usage. Like to me, this was like one of those things that was just special.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I was always wondering, would I get a Zen 2 Threadripper? Well, what was the entry level on that? Like $1,400? And I was like, no, I won't.
Yeah.
and I think Zen 1, Zen Plus Threadrippers would start at like $500 to $1,000, but that's only because they suffered in gaming performance and they had to. Intel was in control. Intel's not in control anymore. So I think like you highlight it, and Kronos, like, are you going to pay $1,500 for a 32 core on AM5? Is anyone going to do that? Who needs 32 cores on AM5? That's kind of my counterpoint. I think they might if they need to, but there's a chance Zen 4 may beat 24-core Raptor Lake, because 16 of those Raptor Lake cores are little cores. Like, Zen 4 may beat it with just 16 cores. And if it does, even in multi-threading, I don't know why. I know why they would, but I don't think they have to launch any more cores to consumers, even if Threadripper's now, I don't know, what's it at then? 6 times the cores? Like, it's just a different segment. Who needs more than 16 cores that isn't willing to spend $4,000 on a CPU?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the whole HEDT versus consumer platform is an interesting conversation, because there was that period with Intel's like X platform where it became really difficult for them to justify those parts, even with the increased I/O and stuff. And I saw one of the things that you sent over was leaks for up and coming enthusiasts or like HEDT in Intel CPUs. But it seems like for the last 4 years, I don't know how long it's been, but Intel's given up on that segment, because it's like, if just go to just buy a Xeon, basically, if you need that additional. So I don't know how important, how important is Threadripper as opposed to Epic for AMD as a company. Like, if they need to launch a 24-core part to stay competitive in the consumer market, like, which they probably wouldn't, like you said, there's a good chance that they wouldn't, but I feel like, would they care if it affects Threadripper sales? Because
well, I think there's a real question on if, and to, answer Kronos one thing quickly here, like, I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying I almost don't. I almost feel like something's got to give, because it's so funny you brought up those old Intel HEDT platforms. The only reason those really existed, as I pointed out in a recent video, actually, is because they still only had 4 cores on consumer. Because why? No competition. And there was, for Broadwell E, for server Broadwell, they were up to 24 cores, where their desktop counterpart had 4 cores. That's why they launched 10-core Broadwell E, because it wasn't even half as many, But it's not hard for AMD to launch more cores. It's just, they're not giving you just 4 or even just 8 cores on consumer. They're giving you 16. And I understand there's this ratio that's kind of always been there, but at the same time I go, yeah, but what apps are you using that you need more than 16 cores, and you're not a professional with a boatload of money to spend? Because AMD's job isn't to give you a cheap core count bragging rights thing, which I feel like half the people that bought the first gen Threadripper was just so they could brag they had 16 cores when everyone else had 4 cores, which that was fun for how cheap it was. But and I'm almost starting to wonder if HEDT even makes sense anymore when they also have Workstation. Like, and that Fishhawk Falls leak that I sent you, which for everyone listening, like this is a leak that's not just based on me talking to people. Like I have dozens of pictures and spec sheets for products. Like I know what it is. It's only workstation. And Intel's talking about killing off HEDT potentially and just calling it consumer workstation. Because from Intel's perspective, it's not HEDT anymore, which HEDT stands for high-end desktop. And they're like, 40 cores is not just high end. That's a server chip, dude. Like, what are you talking about high end? I almost wonder if HEDT is in a no man's land now in general.
Yeah, because it's like, Threadripper is kind of like diet EPYC anyway. And if you get to a point where with AM5, we're also going to be getting PCIe 5, aren't we? And DDR5.
So we should, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of those bandwidth considerations for things like I/O and stuff, because PCIe 5 is really fast. Like, I feel like just progress is kind of eroding the need for Threadripper anyway. Like, I don't know.
Because remember, people point this out, right? Zen 1 EPYC, Naples, 32 cores, Zen 1 Threadripper 16, Zen 1 AM4, 8 cores. I understand there was this 8-16-32 doubling ratio between the products, but you got to understand that it was way overdue to have more than 4 cores. And there was this opening for 16 cores because 8 cores wasn't even enough for a lot of people. We had been on 4 cores since the 2000s. Yeah. Like there were a lot of people that wanted more than 8, but now they've filled that. And so is Intel, So it's almost like, and I look at and I've seen another part of his question that, he brings up the I/O, and it's like, X570, I feel like skimped on the amount of I/O a tiny bit. Like I only have room on it's a DTX motherboard, so it's small, but I only have room for 2 NVMe drives and 4 SATA drives, but that's still 6 SSDs. I still have 2 open slots right now. I'm feeling fine.
Yeah.
My understanding is X670 is probably going to double that. Who needs more than 12 SSDs or something? And that's my motherboard. There's X570 motherboards out there that can hold 12 SSDs right now. I just don't know who needs 12 SSDs that doesn't have a boatload of money though.
That isn't going to buy EPYC. Yeah. That isn't going to buy just high-end server grade hardware. Yeah.
And what's the point of workstation and HEDT anymore? They're the same thing, aren't they? I mean, again, as Intel Contact puts it, is 32 cores HEDT? This isn't high end. This is ludicrous desktop.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the companies feel about how attached they are to that market, to Threadripper, for example, because like you said, in earlier Zen products, there was a lot of need for it, but now it's kind of done what it's needed to do.
And where's Zen 3 Threadripper or Zen 3D Threadripper? They probably won't launch those. I'm under the impression they will still launch Zen 4 Threadripper, but it sounds like that might not come out till 2023. So I honestly see it kind of like the way I see the low-end market. For graphics cards. They're going to make low-end cards below 400 every now and then forever. Because my friend just had his RX 480 break that he was gaming on for 5 years. They have to every now and then.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be a new Threadripper every year. I think it's going to be and I wonder if they'll even announce it. Here comes Zen 4 Threadripper. By the way, shut up about Zen 5. You'll get Zen 6 Threadripper because this is such a smaller market than consumer and, workstation and server workstation and consumer.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that.
And I mean, again, I don't know. I just can't see myself. I would like more than 16 cores, but I'm not paying extra for it because none of my apps use it, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just I feel like the price point is more important than the just outright core count.
And if Zen 4 increases IPC by 30%, which certainly could, that they keep doing that. I mean, is that not good? And I don't know. I think it all comes down to if it beats Raptor Lake in multi-threading. And what I've been told is they think it will. They think they will manage to edge out Raptor Lake in multi-threading, which considering Raptor Lake has 24 cores and Zen 4 probably right. Well, Raphael at the very least is the main version of it, has 16. If they beat it in multi-threading with less cores, that probably means they also crush them in gaming.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I if they need to, I think they will, Kronos. But I just don't know why they would launch something they don't need to. If I were them, I'd just focus on trying to get people to buy a workstation. Want some? All right, you can keep having holiday cookies if you want, but keep in mind, you're probably going to want something healthier in about a month. That's right. Today's piece of content is sponsored by Vite Ramen. Whether you're looking for something easy to make on your lunch break from home during December, or something that also checks all of your healthy boxes when you try to work off that holiday weight in January, Vite Ramen has you covered. It's made in America by Americans with healthy ingredients, and if you go to the link in the description or on screen and use the code BROKENSILICON, you will get 10% off your offer. I mean, it really doesn't matter what you're looking for in an easy-to-make meal. Vite Ramen takes less than 5 minutes. It tastes great, and it's not bad for you. That's why I actually do myself eat it regularly, and why I recommend you do as well. Again, use the link in the description or on screen, and use the offer code BROKENSILICON. This does legitimately help the channel a lot, and it also helps you save some time and eat healthy. Buy Vite Ramen today. Brett Summers writes in, any news on Zen 4 IPC performance with Vcache? I'd assume after Zen 3 Vcache comes out, that most models should get a Vcache version with Zen 4, or will we still have it segmented to L3 plus Vcache separately? So if Zen 4 is 20 to 30% better than Zen 3, is this Zen 3 with or without Vcache? Which I quoted, which is the minimum is 20%. And the write-up I have here, because I did think about this when this question was asked, this is kind of something I've danced around not answering for a while. My opinion is, after thinking about it, that Zen 4 being 20 to 30% better than Zen 3, both of them without Vcache. That's all that means. Now, Vcache to Vcache, I don't know. It's hard for me to say what that will mean, because on the one hand, Zen 3D will be 10% better than Zen 3. Okay, but my understanding is Zen 3 was built with Vcache in mind, but it didn't need it. I don't know if you know this, they actually had prototypes with Vcache of Zen 2. They just couldn't get it yielding past like 10%. And then they got Zen 3 working with Vcache. And the Zen 3D has no changes. It's literally the same dies. They've literally just been using the mass manufactured dies trying to get them yielding with Vcache for a year, and then they did. So my understanding is that Zen 4 doesn't need Vcache to outperform Zen 3, but that it was built more from the ground up to use it. But what does that mean? How much of the benefit is it? That mean it will get 5% more benefit than what Zen 3 got from it? 20%? I don't know. I lean towards it just being whatever I said. So let's say it's 25%. Zen 4 is 25% better than Zen 3. So Zen 4 with Vcache is probably 25% better than Zen 3 with Vcache. That's my guess. And I don't think all Zen 4 CPUs will have Vcache because that's expensive.
So what point do you think that, at what price point are you going to start seeing CPUs lose Vcache in the product stack?
It's hard for me to say because we keep coming back to it. I think it's going to come down to competition, because my understanding is their yields on Zen 3D with Vcache are like 90% at least. So if they need to, I don't think they have to not give Vcache to almost any of them.
Okay.
But it is kind of an exponential thing. So let's say they have 95% yields, but then they lose 10% of those. Well, that means your 95% yields, you have to multiply 0.95 times 0.9. Really now your yields are down to, below 86%. Right? And you have to remember, like, is it 9? I've also heard it could be 80. So if it's 0.95 times 0.8, that means those were your perfect 8-core yields you're going to put Vcache on. They were getting 95% yields, but now that you lose 80% of the 95, it's actually down to 76% yields. It's not very good. So I just don't know exactly where that's going to shake out. But I think they could afford to give the whole line of Vcache if they wanted to. I've just been told they're not going to. And my guess is below 300. No.
Okay.
But it's going to depend, because it will be competing with Raptor Lake. And I think half a year after, or maybe 8 months after Raptor Lake, Meteor Lake launches. And I just heard from an Intel contact, we're going to wipe the floor with AMD, by the way. So
Okay.
I don't know if they will. Intel's been wrong before. But that sounds like starting 2023, they're not screwing around anymore. So that's really exciting. And if that's true, it's not too expensive, guys. They could put Vcache on all of it if they wanted to, I think. But that's a good follow-up question though to that idea.
Yeah, it'll be because like I guess that kind of dictates everything that happens in this market is what can they get away with basically
Yep.
that makes them the most money.
Well, and put things in perspective then, like, okay, so let's say Zen 4 with Vcache is 40% better than Zen 3 and IPC. Oh, man, I think you're fine with 16 cores for a lot of tasks, guys. Let me move on here. So here's another product. I don't know if you even noticed this coming out. There's been few rumors about it, and there's really not much information, but it's AMD Monet. Carbon Cry wrote in and asked, is there any new scuttlebutt on Monet? And this is a 4-core, 8-thread Zen 3 plus 4 compute unit, I believe. I know there's some conjecture out there, but I believe it's 4 compute units of RDNA 2, built on Global Foundries' latest 12 nanometer, which must be pointed out. Global Foundries' latest 12 nanometer is actually not the one they made the 590 on. It's actually, they have a newer one that's like 20% better than that. So that's what Monet is. They're looking to put Zen 3 on 12 nanometer. I don't know. The only thing I'll say before I ask you this question, Dawid, is my understanding is it's the end of next year, so I don't even know if I care. But like, is that exciting to you at all to hear that they're kind of starting to backport more than? But it's not going to be new by then.
Yeah,
on 12 nanometer or not. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, you made a note here about it being a sub $100 kind of range that they're potentially going to be launching for desktops.
Yeah, that's not like I know that, but that's my guess, right?
Okay.
And if you think about it, ever since Zen 2, AMD's been really reluctant to price anything below 150.
Yeah.
And that's for two reasons. One, they don't need to. Again, competition.
Yeah.
But the other reason is they have to package multiple dies together and ship a bunch of types of products all over the world and put them together. So it's more expensive to make. The floor and the cost is higher. Making a monolithic 12 nanometer die, I mean, we've been seeing 14 nanometer chips for $50 since.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that if they want to, this could be the new Pentium killer.
Yeah, I mean, I always have fun playing with those CPUs and APUs. I think it's just interesting to see what kind of gaming you can get on the type of CPU that you put in an office PC that's designed for Gmail. I'd love to play with that. But
I just hope it comes out sooner than late next year.
Yeah.
Because the market could really use it right now. The thing that excites me more about an idea of a quad-core Zen 3 monolithic chip launching under 100 is that might actually be pretty close to the consoles. The consoles run at like 3.5 gigahertz or something. They have 8 Zen 2 cores, so this is like 20% more IPC. Probably clocked above 4 gigahertz. So I think you might be able to keep up with the consoles with a sub $100 chip then. That might be pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, how many compute units did you say they were looking at putting in the iGPU? Like,
I don't personally know anyone that knows how much it is, but I've seen conjecture online that says 2 to 4. And it's like, I don't know, has anyone noticed RDNA is only disabled in amounts of 4?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I can't say much more about what I know about that because I've been told not to by an AMD engineer. There's a technical reason for that, actually.
Okay.
There's not a reason. It's like it would not work, is my understanding, but it's about kind of balancing performance. And so I feel like either I feel like 4 then. And it's on 12 nanometers, so like, if they have half as many cores, why would they not have as many compute units? I don't know. That's kind of, and I kind of don't think it'll be 6. I think 2 compute units just seems really weak to me and like a weird number.
Yeah, and I mean, considering what the Vega 3 iGPU and the 5300G can do, that's actually kind of going to be a beast. it's going to be real powerful actually for like a sub $100. Yeah, that's really exciting. Hopefully that doesn't take too long.
And I think some people look at Rocket Lake and they'll go, that used way too much energy backporting Tiger Lake. And it's like, yeah, but they're also cutting the core counts in half, unlike Tiger Lake. So I see no reason why they couldn't get away. That's probably a node that's better than Intel's 14 nanometer too. Like, I don't see why they can't get away. If they have 15 watt 8 cores right now, why can't they have 15 watt quad cores on 12 nanometer. I don't see why they can't, So I don't actually think it'll use a boatload of energy either. I think, it could be an APU that's certainly capable of running Fortnite and stuff. And that would be really cool for like your $200 laptops. That would be just another echelon of performance upgrade over the garbage they have right now.
Yo, $200 laptops at the moment are shocking. Like they haven't
really increased in performance for years. I mean, it's like Jaguar practically. We haven't gotten anything interesting.
Yeah, I did a video on a Best Buy $200 laptop a couple of months ago, and it's so bad. Like it really struggles. No, that is a very interesting potential product. I feel like I've just been saying that the whole time. That sounds very interesting. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I hope it points to I hope AMD is just more aggressive with that, because my understanding, and I talked about this on the last podcast, is that Van Gogh was really meant for products late 2020. I mean, think about it. It's Zen 2 and RDNA 2. And my understanding is it never got into the original contracts. And then Valve was like, we'll use it if you have this, So I just hope I just feel like, though, Van Gogh would have been way more interesting if it came out 2020. I mean, 8 RDNA 2 compute units, a quad-core Zen 2, that would have been awesome. But now that it's coming out in 2022, it's like, all right, I guess. It's not that cutting edge. I hope they're more aggressive. I hope, what I'm saying is I hope they get I hope in 2023, there's a 7 nanometer Zen 4 12 RDNA 3 micro APU or something. I just hope they keep up with these half APUs and don't take 2 years to come out, because the market needs this.
So are they not going to change the hardware specification at all with this delay on the Steam Deck?
Oh, no. It's the same. It's the same 1.5 teraflops at most. Again, they say at top boost clocks. It's not in a desktop, so I don't know what that means. It's really, it's the same performance to my understanding. I don't even know what they would use if they had to. I don't think there's really an alternative from AMD behind the scenes right now. I disabled Rembrandt maybe, but that's a bigger APU. So no, it's still going to be the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. All right, so the remaining stuff here, we've already talked about RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 plenty. I guess Alexander writes in, what month do you think RDNA 3 will launch? Will it be before or after GPU prices and availability begin to stabilize? I recall you placing an estimate on when the crash would occur, but don't remember what was your guess. Wasn't it mid-2022? My guess is it's just going to be a slight decline through 2022. I don't think there's going to be a crash until the end, though. But when I hear about people hoarding components, I'm like, so hoarding, someone's going to be the last guy with a warehouse full of stuff that realizes he took too long to sell. It's all speculation, and speculation always ends with bubble pops. I don't know when that's going to be, though. I think RDNA 3 will be launching when things are feeling... I wouldn't be surprised if it feels fixed, right? But it's not. Almost like how COVID will probably feel next year, where it's like, things are back to normal relative to 2020, but they're not like 2019, dude. You don't remember?
Yeah.
How open things were. That's kind of what I expect. And I don't know. My guess is Q3, but it's a guess. It's as soon as they can get it out, honestly. But when you see 6 nanometer RDNA 2 coming Q1, that to me suggests it's probably later in the year. Otherwise, why would they be launching a refresh, before it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then there's Lovelace, which I believe we already talked about.
About those yummy 500 watt potential GPUs. That's exciting.
Yeah, I don't know, but that I have much else to say about that, except that anyone who thinks competition isn't back, it is. But some of these companies are going to go through weird lengths to stay competitive. Milan X, I don't know that we have much to say. Do you have much to say about Vcache on Zen 3 Epic? That's coming out next year. It's just give it an honorable mention at least.
Yeah, more epicness. It's exciting. Yeah.
I assume you have similar things to say about Genoa and Bergamo, the 128 core that they announced. It's not really for gamers.
Yeah. And it's like pushing the envelope, but yeah.
Sapphire Rapids, Hey, it's better than Ice Lake X, but it's half the cores of AMD. So
Yeah.
stay in there, Intel. You're not a third the performance anymore. Now you're just half. Good job.
Yeah, they're closing that gap.
Let's see. Nintendo Super Switch. Do you have any thoughts about a new Nintendo handheld? I've been meaning to talk to someone about that this year. That thing's long in the tooth. Like, I don't know if you've seen any rumors about it, what you want out of it, if you have anything to say about it.
I like the display change. I feel like the display on the current one is due for an upgrade. But in terms of like how much the additional performance is going to help in terms of like Nintendo games, because they're all, because it's more a refresh console than it is a new generation, isn't it? Like they're not.
Oh, this year's was, yeah. But I'm under the impression, based on people I've talked to, that they could have a full new Switch at the end of next year or early 2023 based on either Lovelace or Ampere, actually.
And that's what they're calling the Super Switch. That's what
I'm calling it, because I think that's the funnest name. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Nintendo have their own world that they compete in, because Xbox and the Xbox and the PlayStation fight each other in terms of like making the most pretty games, and then Nintendo just does its own thing and it works. So I think if they all they need to do is offer a higher resolution alternative to the current stuff, because 720p is brutal.
And it can barely run games even at that anymore. It has Maxwell. I mean,
exactly, yeah. So I think if they can kind of push it up to a point where you can, with docking, get closer to 4K with a lot of Nintendo. It doesn't need to be 4K, but it just doesn't need to be 720p upsampled. Like, yeah.
Maybe if they could have like a built-in DLSS, like 2.3 in every single game, they could maybe get away with 4K. With DLSS, I can get away with 4K on my 2060 laptop in more games than you'd think, actually, if they're a couple years old. And 2060 was as strong as, what was it? It's about a 1080. So yeah, I mean, that's not really surprising then. I guess that is kind of the only question I would really have. I mean, if we're looking at, just say the PS5 and Xbox Series X are pretty close in performance. I peg them at around a 3060 Ti. They have 16 gigs of RAM. What do you think the Super Switch needs to be? And remember, this is 2 years away, so we'll be on like 5 or 4 nanometer by then. But like, what does it need to be in performance? Do you think it needs to be 3060 performance, 3050 Ti performance? How much RAM? I wonder what you would guess.
I feel like it doesn't matter, to be honest. Like I feel like Nintendo is like the kind of form factor that they're in now works really well, and their games are the thing that's important. If it's shinier, like it's great, but I don't know how much the power of a Nintendo console really matters, because they've never played, they've never been part of that arms race. And it doesn't.
Well, they did, but not for decades.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah. Ages ago they did, but like in recent kind of it, I feel like it's going to be fine, whatever it is. It just needs to be a step up from what they're offering at the moment. And if they can fix the ergonomic issues of the current Switch, I'd be happy. But their games are the thing that's important. So just better.
It's, and my Nintendo, and I call it the Super Switch because of like Super NES. I thought that was a funner name than Switch 2, but I've heard a lot of people tell me they think that's a dumb name. So maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, also like it's an Nvidia thing. So Nvidia likes to use super branding. So I was like, perfect, the Super Switch. But I don't know. That was just what my brain was thinking. But it all came from this grain of information about how some developers were saying Lovelace might be, which at this point I am convinced it's the next generation of NVIDIA cards. It seems to be what everyone's saying, and it's what I've heard, so I think it is. But I heard early on a couple developers like, I almost think Lovelace is just a Nintendo APU. And that's what sent me down a rabbit hole of calling everyone I could, like, because a lot of times sources only have part of the picture. The first thing I thought of when someone said, my impression is Lovelace is a Nintendo APU, was let me double check that the other people saying Lovelace aren't crazy. They're not. They're leakers who have gotten stuff right before. And I went, okay, so if there's a likely chance it's that, does this developer not realize Nintendo may be using Lovelace? Right? Like, does he not understand that? No, it's just a Lovelace APU. And if you look at NVIDIA's roadmap, they've had Volta. They had their Maxwell one come out, which is what's in the Switch. They actually had the Pascal one come out before the Switch was out. So Nintendo just decided to use Maxwell, I guess.
Okay.
Insane. And then they had Volta come out a year after the Switch was out. I'm under the impression I don't even know if it was a year. I think it was the same year the Switch came out, actually. Volta came out as in their Tegra lineup. Honestly, I think Nintendo could have had a Volta Switch if they wanted to with Tensor cores, but they decided Maxwell, I guess. And, if you look at NVIDIA's roadmap, they haven't refreshed since Volta. So they have Orin coming out. I think it's basically early next year, around when this dev said they're sampling the Switch APU, they're sampling Orin. And I'm like, does this guy not realize what he just said? And then I know Atlan comes out a year and a half after that. And that's certainly based on probably something after Lovelace. So I think, and then also Nintendo stopped production of their chips and they bought up 30 million or 32 million. I looked up how many they're selling a year. The amount of last production they did was exactly enough for 2 more years of sales.
Oh, okay.
And this is when I started feeling like, Charlie Day and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like, the dots connect, guys. Guys, the new Switch is coming out in a year and a half, And if you look at when the OLED model came out, a year and a half before, I believe, the Super Switch will. When did the Nintendo DS, or what is it, the big version of the 3DS come out? Or whatever, a year and a half. But I think the DSi was a year and a half before. Like, I was like, oh my God. Like, this is literally all things point to a much more powerful Switch coming. I just don't know what. The problem is this. My understanding is Orin has 2,048 CUDA cores. It's about as strong as a laptop 3050, it seems. Okay. But keep in mind that NVIDIA, and Nintendo did not use the full Maxwell die. They cut it in half. So I don't know how many they're going to have enabled, I don't know if it's going to be Lovelace. My understanding is Lovelace is very similar anyways. My big argument actually is that if I was NVIDIA, I would give them Lovelace in it for the same price, because think of how useful it's been to AMD that the PS4 and Xbox One had GCN the entire time NVIDIA was dominating market share. The question I ask myself, is NVIDIA happy that devs are optimizing The Witcher 3 for Maxwell instead of Turing or Ampere or Volta? So that's what I wonder, but I just don't know what my understanding is Nintendo chose Maxwell because they weren't willing to spend an extra $10 on like the Volta die or something.
Okay, so, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and I know I've been talking for a long time, like kind of catching you up on my way of thinking here, but I'm like, don't you think though it would have been cool if the Switch was not that weak? Like, because I don't think it would have. It has 3 gigs of RAM, I believe 3.2, and I think it has like a 256 CUDA core Maxwell die. Like, what if it was 512 Volta? What if it had 6 gigs of RAM? You can't tell me it couldn't have run every PS4 game. It wouldn't have been as strong as the PS4, but it would have been close enough. That they could squeeze every game on there. I guess what I'm saying is, do you think it matters though? Do you think it matters if the Super Switch has, 16 gigs of RAM and is around the performance of a Series S, or can it just have 8 gigabytes and be half the performance again of the weakest Xbox? Do you think which one do you think they're more likely to do and which one do you think they should do? Because I don't think it costs more than like $50 to double, triple its performance and give it enough RAM.
Yeah, I think in terms of, market adoption, I don't think it really matters what performance they give for it, because but it would be really awesome if they do make a super Switch that's as super as possible, because the Switch is a really awesome like indie gaming platform. And the more power that you give it in a situation like that, the more versatile it becomes for that use case. So I think it would be awesome if they if Nvidia basically goes, here is a more powerful one than you were willing to use, that would be amazing. But I feel like if that doesn't happen, Nintendo is still going to sell huge amounts of the Switch because its main draw isn't necessarily its hardware power. It's more it's the ecosystem around that. I feel like considering how much more expensive everything has become, I think it would be an interesting advantage for them to keep it as cheap as possible. But that additional performance, because look, at the end of the day, Nintendo they're the ones that commission a lot of the games, right? People are making the games
Right.
for the hardware that they have, as opposed to like they have to provide the like like people are gonna make Nintendo games. They're like it's so I actually think a lower price point is more important.
From a business perspective, like they will be more successful.
I think so. I think they'd be, but I mean, I'm sure they have, because one of the points as well is if you have less powerful hardware, I don't know to what extent they consider this, but it technically makes it easier to make games for it because you don't have to have like crazy like graphics design budgets and whatever. Like your engines don't have to be. You can just use. Like, because I mean, I don't know how much easier it is to make a game for the Switch than it is for a PS4, for example. Just purely
Actually, here it's very easy to make a game on the Xbox and PS4. I've asked devs this. Yeah, I did. I was at the Carolina Games Summit, and I was talking to the Spirit of the North indie devs, and they might come on the show too. But I talked to them in person, what's the harder one to program for? I think they all had their own issues.
Okay.
There was a problem, I believe, with the PS4 in terms of communication to indie devs or something like that, which is funny because that was something, if you remember the PS4 launch, Sony was just like, we love indies. It just seems like Xbox has catered to that more since they've fallen behind in sales, and that Sony's kind of neglected that is my understanding. But overall, the console was okay to program for. They said the Switch was an absolute nightmare because of how weak it is.
Oh, that's interesting. You have to really optimize the crap out of it to get it
even
to run.
A game like Spirit of the North, this Fox game, they said they had to like completely remap levels to get it to work on there, and that he said he used the word nightmare. It was a nightmare to program on.
So maybe it would be beneficial for Nintendo to have more powerful hardware in the up and coming Switch if it makes it easier for third-party developers to port games to it. So then they may be able to host a bigger library of third-party games.
I think, and I think it's just coming down to nailing it, because I'm not one of these guys that is an idiot and doesn't understand how their business model works or thinks they need to beat the PS5 in performance. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just think that this is a pet peeve I've had with Nintendo design. I just feel like every generation, if they would have just done a couple knobs differently, they could have had way more performance. And again, like I told you with the Switch, like pay the $10 for Pascal, dude. Double the RAM to 6 gigabytes. 6 gigabytes is enough. Like the devs I talked to, they're like, how much more RAM would you have wanted? And they're like, any amount, 500 megabytes more RAM. Like it was terrible. Like, so I don't know what that level is. Is 16 gigabytes going to be enough? If it launched right now, yeah, probably more than enough for a weak console. Is it enough in 2023? To keep up? I don't know. I think it probably is, but that's what I wonder though, is if they will go with 16 gigabytes and then like, I don't know, right? 1,000 CUDA cores clocked low. And I think the rumor is 12 core CPU, that's ARM. Or will they go to like 500 CUDA cores? Because I do happen to know of a micro version of Orin that I think might have 256 or 512 CUDA cores, and I'm real nervous that they're going to go with something that's just, again, like weaker than a PS4 or something insane, But I don't know. I don't know where that inflection point is, too. I don't know if they gave it a good CPU and 16 gigabytes of RAM, if they could have something of, I don't know, a fifth as strong as a PS5, if it could technically run the games. I guess the final thing to ask about that would be, what do you think about the form factor and battery life? Is that something that needs to be improved? Obviously, the overall design probably won't change that much, but I mean, like, what do you think it's too big? Do you think it could be smaller? Do you think the battery life needs to be any bigger?
So the battery life, better battery life is good. But I think my main concern with the Switch is ergonomically, not in
Mm.
terms of physical size, but in terms of the actual controllers. Or I hate them. I really, really dislike them. So I think if they could find a way to keep that slim profile, but have a controller that doesn't basically give you carpal tunnel just from looking at it, that would be
Hmm.
really cool. But extra battery life would
It
be
always
amazing.
costs more though. Batteries are expensive.
Yes, that's true.
Do you think it's a deal breaker right now that it has like a 3-hour battery life, or do you think it's enough?
I think it's enough. I
Hmm.
think it's okay.
It seems like
Um,
that's what everyone's gravitated towards, is three
yeah,
hours for a handheld. For whatever reason, it used to be 5 hours, or people would get mad at you.
I think 3 is okay. Yeah, because the thing is, like, larger batteries also mean the thing has to be bigger and heavier, and like I get it.
Unless you try to solve it with money, which you can always just spend more on a more expensive battery
Yes,
that's lighter. But
but
um,
it's Nintendo, so
yeah, I agree. I'm sure they just go for a similar battery life. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a little better, but that's my guess. We're almost to the end here. So I'm also under the impression an Xbox Series S refresh may come out at the end of next year. I don't know if you've heard about that or the PS5 Pro leak I did at all. That one actually got shared a lot on websites. I actually was a little mad because I feel like half of them misquoted me.
Oh, really?
Well, because you hear PS5 Pros coming and people went, it's too soon. And I was like, yeah, in 2023 or 2024. That's not too soon. What were you doing in 2018, guys?
Yeah.
That's how far away it is. What are you talking about? But I actually heard that they might do a Series S refresh that's like 40% stronger on 6 nanometer, just the same die. But
Okay.
yields are good enough now that they can just give it the full compute units and faster RAM. And they might just try to keep that $300 price point with something that's half the performance of a Series S instead of a third. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are. Like, I also think if they do that, though, they got to give it more storage.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be a very compelling option, because I think the Xbox Series S is already interesting. It's quite weak, and it's not like, but
Hmm.
I think it's still an interesting, like, more entry level gaming option. So if they can give that more performance and keep it at that price point, it would be huge. I think it would sell well as well, because
Hmm.
it's,
I've
yeah,
just always
like,
felt it's just like that little bit too weak. I
yeah.
love the idea, but I'm like, it doesn't even need a terabyte. If it had 700 gigabytes of storage, like just a little more storage, if it just could push out the frames a little better. I've always felt like that's a killer product.
Definitely.
The funny thing is, I don't know if you've heard this, but they're using the Series X APU literally for their servers. Like for X, like the Series X was dual purpose. It has more teraflops for a reason. It's because, and 2 memory segments for a reason. It's because they can give it 32 gigs of RAM, or no, 22 gigs of RAM. They can double the 10 gig, or the 6 gigabyte portion to 12 and give it 22 gigabytes total. And they can like do 4 Xbox One streaming instances on a Series X in a server. My understanding is that's what they're doing with them right now, and that's why the Series S is so much easier to buy.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know if I have anything else to say about that. I just keep seeing reports of people going, I can't get a Series X, but the Series S is selling well, and I look it up, and the Series S is in stock.
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah.
it's because
Um.
they're not making X's for you guys.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the PS5, in terms of the Series X, I feel like the PS5 is the better option.
Mm.
But the Series S provides a budget alternative, and I think if I mean, to what extent could they make upgradable storage an option, so that they can keep a lower price point with the
Mm.
storage that they have now, and then if you need more
Well,
storage,
they
you can
have
drop some in.
upgradable storage, but it costs $200.
Oh, so you can't just it's like an Xbox thing you have to buy. You can't. Oh, that's
Yeah.
irritating. That's
Yeah.
really annoying.
So in reality, is it really cheaper than the Series X? Because the second you
Yeah.
get a
No.
terabyte of storage added to it, it's more than a Series X.
Stuff like that's so irritating.
Vita
Why?
memory cards, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, yeah.
So is it so you can't just drop an they can't just make it so that you can drop an NVMe drive in
That's
there?
not strictly true. Like the PS5, the Series X, and the Series S can all use a USB drive or external drive to run last gen games.
Oh, okay.
And you can on all of them now. I don't think it was true of the PS5 at launch, but I believe all three consoles now can back up a downloaded game to an external USB.
Okay.
So, and to put things in perspective, I know some people go a USB. Who would really use that? When I got the PS5, I got for $30 a USB 3.1 drive that was 256 gigabytes of storage, and $30, 256 gigabytes, and it has 250 megabytes per second of bandwidth. So that's like a weak SATA drive for $30. Plugs in the back of the console. It can't run the new next gen games, but it can run PS4 games. I don't really need to store more than 6 PS4 games at once
Yeah.
off of the main drive. So I don't, it's probably not as big of a deal as you would think because you can do that with the Series S as well. But also some games are over 100 gigabytes. So that, see, but that's what I'm saying is that it had 768 gigabytes. It's like either you have enough or you don't.
Mhm.
512 gigabytes means they only have like 300 gigabytes of usable, meaning if you have Warzone, you can install another game. I mean, I don't, you know? So, like, it's literally, I feel like if they just added 200 more gigabytes, I mean, I don't know if they can, but if they make it like 800 gigabytes even, and give it 50% more performance, that's when I think it just becomes a killer product.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, especially if they can keep that price point. It would be really, really good. I think it would be really compelling.
The rumor is too, or what it sounds like to me is what they might do is they might keep that price point with the upgrades and then take the old dies that are disabled and drop them down to 200.
Okay. Okay. I like the sound of that as well because then that would actually be really good so that you can get like for $200 you can get a usable gaming device.
Then I don't complain about the storage. Then it's like I'll put up with installing one game at a time, whatever.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Tick Tickler writes in, there's absolutely no way around it. The Series S is too weak. More than half of the X's price, 1/3 of the teraflops, and seemingly can't even reliably push a fourth of the pixels. And I've still heard honest to God people say it's a better deal than the PS5 digital. How strong will the refresh be? Well, I've already answered that. Also, is Microsoft outbidding Sony now? The PS4 is outpacing the PS5 in sales all of a sudden. And those little sub Xbox One X bastards are everywhere. I feel like we're seeing Tick Diggler favors one side over the other here. Well, I don't know if they're bastards. What I would say is you have to remember that my understanding is it's logistics is causing the slowdown in PS5 production right now, and they don't like it at all. So I don't think they're outbidding them. Maybe there's some of that, though. See, I do think that Microsoft underestimated the demand for their consoles, though. Like they thought Sony would run away with it, and they kind of did, but I don't know how much of that was Sony just made twice as many, you know? So I don't know. It does seem like it's easier to get Xbox consoles, though. So it still seems like Sony has a reason to make more. But the other thing, though, is if you see a bunch of those sub Xbox One X bastards around, it's because the die size of the Series S is like almost half that. I think it's like 2/3 that of a Series X. So they can just make more, and there's shortages. So I also believe another reason they're not making as many Series X's right now is their overall goal is Game Pass. That's what they want. People to sign up for Game Pass. They don't care what you're on. They even put Halo on an Xbox One that's 1.3 teraflops. That's why they want Game Pass people. And if that means during a shortage, they can switch some of their capacity over from making 3 Series S's instead of 2 Series X's, I think they're just deciding to do that. In terms of how weak it is, honestly, guys, the way I would describe it is it's a PS4 Pro with a next-gen SSD and and CPU. It really is the graphic. Like there are some games like what is it? Is it Resident Evil where the Xbox One version actually runs at a higher resolution. Xbox One X version runs at a higher resolution than the Series S. It's weird because it just has so much less bandwidth. It really is actually a little weaker than the One X graphics card, but a lot stronger in the CPU. You know, it's so funny, by the way. It's just to throw this in here, since we were talking about the consoles, how quaint it was. I heard people saying Sony can't charge $600 for the PS5 because there's no way it will sell. I think in terms of market perception, it's probably good they didn't, but I think we all know now the Series X and PS5 could have cost 600. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. I mean,
Yeah.
it could have. I mean, look at. Anyways, though, final reader mails. KJM015 writes in, Season's greetings, Tom and Dawid. Do either of you believe that 8K will ever become a practical resolution for consumers? If so, could next year's launches of RDNA 3 and Lovelace be the first generations to provide a decent gaming experience in 8K? I think you define decent. Is 60 frames decent? If it doubles 3090 performance, I mean, yeah, it's probably actually, Hardware Unboxed would say it's not. He would say that's still a little weak for 8K if you really wanted to do it comfortably. But I don't know. Do you think 8K, Dawid, will ever be a practical resolution?
I mean, ever is a long time. I feel like I feel
Yeah.
like 10, 15 years from now, maybe. Like it's things get faster and monitors get higher Ks in them. So I think eventually. I don't know if the next generation is gonna have, like decent performance. Like you were saying, decent so relative. If it can run 8K in the way that a 1080 could run 4K, then yeah, that's okay. That's pretty decent. But I don't
Yeah,
think
and I think it might. That's an interesting analogy. Yeah, I'd say it probably will, Not a
yeah,
1080 Ti, but a 1080, probably.
yeah, that's not too bad. I gamed in 4K on a 1080 for a while, and it's perfectly doable. So the problem then is just that 8K monitors are still going to be rare. Like you're not going to be able to buy an affordable, reasonable 8K monitor that you would buy over a lower resolution one. So I think it's probably going to take more generations than that, but maybe eventually.
Well, that's the thing, too, is you already had when 1080p came out, people going, I can't see the difference between that and 720p. And I'm like, I can.
Yeah.
Genius. And then you had 1440p come out, and that was mostly fun, I feel like, because it was cheap Korean monitors at first, and we'd been stuck on 1080p for so long. And then 4K came out, and people were like, I don't know if it's worth it. Actually, the first year, I feel like there was a 4K craze, actually. Everyone was excited. But after that, people were like, is it really worth it? I think now you have your 4K monitors that are finally at a reasonable price relative to 1440p where it makes sense. But it feels like that gap keeps getting smaller where people are willing to pay more for more resolution and people keep getting more happy. So I just can't see, like right now, I feel like people are okay to pay $600 for a 4K 120 monitor, certainly over $400 for a 1440p or even $500. I don't think they're willing to pay $1,000 though. And I don't think people will pay $1,000 for an 8K 120 monitor if a 4K 120 is $500. I think no one will care at all.
Yeah. No,
I can just be like,
that's true.
how much? Like, and I think my brother Dan said, I will get an 8K monitor over a 4K one if the frame rate's the same, and if it's literally almost a negligible price increase, like 20% more. Sure, I'll pay an extra $100 for 8K.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. The performance is not going to be the same. Like, that's the problem. Like, the additional resolution makes it so challenging. Like, with 4K high refresh rate, like, you need to buy a beast GPU to do that properly. Whereas you can get a pretty similar gaming experience with a much cheaper GPU on a 1440p monitor. And then the whole, like, I agree with that. I feel like it's going to be difficult to get consumers to move to 8K. I think just eventually it may end up getting to that point, but 1440p is already really good, and you don't have to pay $2,000 for a graphics card to run it. So,
and I almost
great.
can't see myself going above like 5K because I've seen 5K displays and I can see the difference. It looks better. But again, I'm not paying twice as much for 5K over 4K. I mean, I don't know. Again, like, let's put things in perspective. The 8900 XT will probably be more than capable of doing 8K at least 100. But would you rather do that or laugh at running 4K 120 or 4K 60, Like 160, I meant to say 4K 160. Or would you honestly, like, it gets to the point where it's like, would you rather run 8K 120 or run 4K 120 and put out half as much heat in your room?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because the difference is becoming so, and here's the thing too, with like FSR, DLSS, soon XE super sampling, dynamic resolutions. I was looking at Halo benchmarks and I was like, oh, really? They're getting low performance in those scenes. I just have dynamic resolution on my 3070, and I'm like, I can't tell. It's might as well be 4K the whole time to me. I can't see myself. The jaggies aren't there anymore like they were, in the past, to the point, even the console games I look at, it's like, wow, no jaggies in a console game. It's crazy.
Yeah. Like the law of diminishing returns is kicking in real hard with resolution.
Mm-hmm. All right, final question. Alexander writes in, do either of you have most anticipated games for 2022? And I actually want to go first because I said, yeah, my most anticipated game for next year is when Battlefield, Halo, and Age of Empires 4 are finished.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's very exciting.
Because I was talking to Dan about this the other day. God, it seems like most of the releases this fall are like the COVID games. These are the games that just don't seem to be finished.
Yeah.
Like last year's. They don't feel finished, almost any game I played.
Yeah, no, definitely. Although Stalker 2 is
that's on my list as well.
Yeah, that is because I loved the first Stalker, and like Clear Sky and stuff. Like the expansions were also, well, yeah, I guess expansion. I don't quite know what you call that, but yeah. So I think Stalker definitely. But the games that I mostly play are like Tarkov and Dota. So that's like those games, they're just always in development, basically. So
yeah, yeah, they're always a work in progress.
Yeah,
you're just still playing them. Yeah, I play a lot of Deep Rock Galactic. God knows I'll probably just be playing that a ton still next year. I mean, yeah, I look at this though. There's also God of War, Elden Ring, Horizon 2, Stalker 2 is on my list. There's some weird ones like The Little Devil Inside, and I'm under the impression there will be games next fall for sure that haven't been announced yet too. Starfield next year too? That'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
There was also I saw an announcement trailer for a Dune game, and the Dune.
I interviewed the director of that game, by the way, on the podcast. If you ever want to listen to it.
Yeah, is it going to be RTS?
So here's the funny thing. I didn't know they were making an RTS game. The contract they have is to make 3 Dune games. Now, most people would assume that means a trilogy. What they did is they went back to them and they said, wait, we noticed the contract is for 3 Dune games. Do they have to be the same genre? And they said no. So I think they're going to make an RTS and an online survival game that takes place 100 years before the movies. So they're just going to have an online survival kind of like Tarkov Dune game as well coming that they've already talked about publicly. I didn't know about this RTS one until I had that announcement. I was like, oh, so there's the second one.
I am really excited for a decent RTS release because like the Dune RTS games were awesome. Like back in the day, the old ones were really good. So that would be amazing. I
also
would love
the lore's combat kind of lends itself to an RTS where you have kind of drop ships and then melee combat combined with like artillery. It's kind of meant to be an RTS game actually when you think about it.
For sure, it works super well. Is that like the old Dune RTS games are some of my favorite games ever? Like really, really good. So I'm excited for that. That's another one.
Yeah. I think next year's going to be insane in terms of games. Hopefully they'll be finished, but I feel like half of these games coming out next year too. Well, yeah, quite literally, Horizon, God of War, those were 2021 games where they said it won't be finished in time, and they decided to not pull a Battlefield.
Yeah.
So I feel like next year will be half of them will be the games that were going to come out this year, but they'll actually be finished, and it's going to be crowded with a bunch of other games. I think next year is going to be like one of the best years of gaming releases in years, actually. Now that I look at this list, like I can't stop naming the amount of games that are probably coming out. And again, I'm sure there's games that they haven't announced yet that are coming out that fall.
I feel like that the game releases are more exciting than the hardware releases at this point. I know that we're biased as hardware people, but like this is they all look really good. I'm excited for gaming.
Yeah. There's nothing more fun for me than when I'm talking to a contact at Sony or Xbox, and I'm like just asking about how the hardware works, and then they're just like, by the way, you want to know something about a Metal Gear Solid thing? And they're like, and I'm just like, yeah, I do. I care way more about that than this freaking graphics card. Actually, I said, what's coming? You know that type of stuff is way more interesting to me. And there's there's some really cool stuff coming. But that's it. We went on for a very long time. I think it tends to happen that way with us. The fact is, though, there really is so much to discuss next year. I know we're excited probably mostly for the games, but if you think about it, let me just make the list one more time for everybody. Rembrandt, low-end and mobile Alder Lake, and then Zen 3D, and then you're going to have refreshes of 6nm RDNA 2 in Ampere, and then you're going to have RDNA 3, Lovelace, Raptor Lake, Zen 4, and possibly a new Xbox, and possibly a new Nintendo console. We'll certainly have rumors of the Nintendo console. If it's not out by then, I'll say that. So the news next year is going to be insane. If whatever you're seeing, the way I would put it is combine everything we've had come out in 2020 and 2021, that much news just next year. So there's half of me that's just like, I'm excited because I'm not going to have to try hard to come up with content ideas. There's the other half of me that's like, I don't know if my family's going to see me that much next year. But I really did appreciate you coming on to speak with me about this again, like you have before, Dawid. Hopefully there will be one episode we do during the end of a year where we're not talking about pandemics and horrible things happening. Hopefully the end of next year will be happier, which it's an election year. Never mind. But it'll be a good time.
That's...
Never mind, but we'll try to keep it happy when we're talking about it. Why don't you plug your channel or whatever you want? What do you want to plug?
Come watch if you want to see things be played with and accidentally broken every now and then. More often than not, actually. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say, like, I check your videos here and there. You're very funny. Like,
really?
Your videos are very, I like how you, oh, really? like your videos are very, very well done. When you do test things, it's tested well. There's a lot of channels that I don't think nail the testing part when they try to be funny. And you have a very good channel, and it's been cool to see your channel really take off this year. And I think there's no surprise. You've made it fun to talk about hardware, even if you can't get it. Most channels couldn't do that.
Yeah, it's because I go and buy the stuff. Like, if it means that the stuff that I talk about is stuff that you can go buy in a shop. I really prefer doing it that way, because then I can also make STD jokes about it without the company getting angry, So I'm like, I'll happily go buy the thing, and then I feel like it forces you to look at relevant hardware,
Well, your channel's name is Dawid Does Tech Stuff. You will definitely find it if you just Google it, let alone put it into YouTube. I can't recommend it enough. And this should be coming out right before New Year's Eve. We have a fun year coming up. Thanks for coming on, Dawid, and thank you to everybody for listening. Have a good and a safe New Year's Eve.
Yes, thank you for having me.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Anthony Gareffa, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yant, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Lynn Lee, Justin Paris, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Jada Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Jaskowiak, Josh Law, JB Jing, Travis Gooding, Mechanical Philosopher, Lee King Kilo, Fatboy Deesru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy MPA 81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, F7 GOS, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N. Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchek, Rend Taro, Matsukata, John Jameson, Sam Bensel, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Rauner, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrans, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Grode, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Koch, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy Garrido, Sound Derson, Joaquim Hagen, Teak Autumn, Sol Connor, Michael Casa, Andrew S., Z Jitz, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Endless Loggins, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Power Stu, Elenia Nanya, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Dane Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Karaman, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russell, Nicoella, Zlicki, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulam, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Brucha, Jeremy So, Michelle Pell, Brett Summers, Eddie Del Castillo, Joseph Loria, Luis Correa, Deke, Cheesy Ramen, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou, Mark Kelly, Valco Malev, Gabe Langner, Rodney, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Sarcastro, Mai Sharona, Waitrui, William W. Draper, Air Rat, Spamton, G. Spamton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amiable Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Semi Malas, James Anderson, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy N.G. Mads, Gordon Freeman, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV Couteau, John Wissink, Mohammed, Jean Debont, Pulse Media, Sean Ashmont, Daniel Dewar, Stephen Zhang, JSMMH, Georgie Kostaninov, PC Beast 22, Reginald Ari, Narathiel, Ivan, Charles Russell, Hall Booma, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.